do a quick test. Okay, you're all good to go. You'll see the live on YouTube at the top, and the drop down will reveal an option to copy the stream link.
Okay, great.
All right, have a good one. Bye.
Thank you, Victor.
You're welcome.
Hi, Katie. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're good.
Good.
We're going to give a few minutes for stragglers and tech lag and all of that.
Okay.
But thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
And so in 5 minutes or so, hi, Carrie. Katie, do you know Carrie Norman?
I think I've seen you at some reviews before, perhaps. Are any of you in the East Coast?
We're both here.
Oh, you're both here. Okay, then
Both
probably not.
But Carrie taught it, I'm giving the bios too soon here, but
Oh, okay.
has taught at University of Pennsylvania, maybe at the same time you were there.
Ah, okay, cool. Did I see Brant's name on the list?
Yes.
Cool.
How do you know Brant?
She was on the same review of mine that you were on.
Oh, that's right.
Yep, for Ben Crone.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
On that review too.
Carrie was
was?
on that review too. That's right. That's right.
Ah, there it is. Okay. Familiar faces. Small world.
Yeah.
Pardon the boxes behind us. We just moved into our new office.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. It's very exciting. It's the Travelers Hotel just opened this week, and that's on the middle floor, and our office is on the first floor.
Very cool.
It's fun. Mixed use development, very relevant to this.
Let's see. We are waiting on, and hi, Leah. Katie, Leah Bohatch is the TA for this studio.
Hi, Leah.
So we are waiting on Brant and Maria, I believe. And Maria has joined the chat. Leah, did you announce the review order?
Yep, I told Jace to get ready.
Okay. Hi, Maria. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing okay. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us. Katie, you probably don't know Maria. Maria, you don't know Katie. Katie, I'm about to give introductions in a minute, but I'll hold. But our we are waiting for one more reviewer, and let's give her a few minutes first. In the meantime, I'm going to put the link to the concept board in the chat. And let me know if that doesn't work for you. You should see a horizontal row with 12 projects. Brant is logging in right now, has a few technical difficulties, but we're about to get started.
Hey, Brant.
Hi, Brant. You're muted.
I just said apologies for being a few minutes late.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Well, let's get started. First, I want to start with some introductions. First, a thank you to all of our reviewers. Thank you, Carrie, Katie, Maria, and Brant. And we'll be joined by the Dean, Iñaki Alday, the Dean of the School of Architecture, in the second half of the review. A couple notes. We're streaming live on YouTube, and I'm going to copy the link in the chat. And Brant, do you have the concept board link already?
I do. Yes.
Okay, great. So just a heads up. I don't know. I have no ability. There's no way to see who's watching the YouTube link, and I'm not sure how. There could be thousands of people and we're going viral, or one person on mute in the corner, you know. So that's a heads up. And hi to all our people on YouTube watching us. So a few introductions. I've given an introduction already to the studio, to Carrie Norman, and I believe Katie Brandt, you certainly know Carrie, and briefly, Carrie is a professor here at Tulane, has degrees from UVA and Princeton, and award-winning practice, and does research in the areas of representation and other visual media. Second, we have Maria Espinoza, who graduated 2 years ago from Tulane. Is that right? It seems like it feels about 10, and is a New Orleans native, and is now at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University, and won, I think, all of the awards at Tulane, if my memory serves, all of the awards possible, and led the DOL, was one of a small group of leaders that basically ran the DOL before Nick. So before there was Nick, there was Maria. We also, next we have Brant Knapp, who is, I'm going to have to necessarily give a very truncated version of this because Brant, I've known Brant for a while. Brant has a firm, Brant Haverford, based in New York. It's an architecture and design studio, and both Brant and her partner Jerome Haverford have taught at I said every school in the tri-state area, has taught first-year studios at Columbia, has taught at University of Pennsylvania, has taught at NJIT, has taught at just about everywhere, if memory serves, and has won numerous awards, competitions for projects in Follies in New York, has been exhibited at the Storefront for Art and Architecture, and has really an exciting body of work. The degrees from Master of Architecture from the Yale School of Architecture as well. And Katie McBride joins us from here in New Orleans, and is an architectural designer at office Jonathan Tate, but prior work experience at Turan Architects here in New Orleans as well, and has also run, is that fair to say, run an urban housing symposium at University of Pennsylvania?
Yes, that's fair to say.
And it was a finished graduate degree at University of Pennsylvania in 2016, 17.
Yes.
Prior to that, Columbus School of Art and Design and art history degree from
Yes.
the College of Wisdom.
Yes.
And actually, Katie, your final review at University of Pennsylvania, Brant and Carrie and myself were all on that final review, which I never put that all together. So this is sort of a reunion. Sorry,
Yeah.
I do that. That was in Ben Crone's studio. So with that, I wish that we could offer you coffee and pastries and so on. But with that, a quick introduction to the studio project. You have the briefs. So I'm sure you've had a chance to go through all of the briefs in detail, but I want to offer again just a summary. This is let's see, stop share. I guess I have to share each time I open a new brief. The project is the Tulane Depot, and basically Tulane University has a remarkable set of archives and collections, including the largest collection of post-larval fish in jars in the world. Over 7 million post-larval fishes in the world, 7 million specimens in over 2,000 jars, and it's in literally a bunker for munitions across the river out in the middle of nowhere. Some of the students visited, and their Uber driver wouldn't even go down because you have to go down a dirt road. So these collections, which include an amazing architecture archive, the Southeastern Architectural Archive, the Newcomb Art Museum, the Louisiana Research Collection, the Jazz Museum. This really diverse range of collections are all scattered and housed throughout the university. And this project proposed bringing them together literally under one roof. And that is similar to, if you know, the Scheidenpott Herzog-Nemeron's project at the across from like the Vitra Museum, part of the Vitra campus, or other places that are basically, it's not quite a museum. It's a working research center, but it has elements of display, but also elements of a storage warehouse. So it exists somewhere in between a warehouse for storage, a museum for display, and a kind of library / research center. And to a degree, each of the students positioned their projects somewhere along that spectrum. They had a mandate that there had to be at least 10% of the storage had to be for display, and at least 10% had to be public, and they could kind of move that dial in between. The program brief, I think, will be clearest from the the projects, and we'll give a little more time to the first project to explain this, but let me see if I can pull up the program brief. Screen sharing failed, of course it did. So the program brief, quickly, it's includes office spaces, a kind of back of house of office spaces, a research room, receiving for storage, loading, workspace. And the bulk of the program, approximately 9,000 square feet, is for archival shelving. Again, this can be public, private, somewhere in between. There's some line, like some sliding line, where all these objects are stored, but also displayed. And then a front of house that includes a lobby, exhibit display, et cetera, et cetera. Part of this too, there was a kind of research phase of this, but just big picture, this was represents a third of the semester. So this is the students' second semester, or in the first year, second semester. And this is their first, there were a lot of firsts this semester, which included their first time doing digital drawing. So there were 3 exercises. The first introduced digital drawing, the second, and just drawing in general, plan section. There was some experience with plans and sections, but not kind of at the level we're talking about today. And then a second assignment that dealt with pedestals and objects and display and 3D modeling. And then this third assignment, which is a design project. So we're looking at a project that, in terms of designing a building, represents a third of the semester. In terms of developing skills with Rhino drawing, digital drawing, representation, plan, sections, perspective, that work has been ongoing the whole semester. And I just want to say too that this review, this is mainly to you, the students, but this review, no doubt we will all talk about the projects foremost, but there's also just a kind of level of accomplishment that we won't be talking about, which is that you've all, everyone in the studio has done very well at, wrangling amid a pandemic where normally you go to the desk next to you and click on someone's mouse, wrangling computer, drawing, Zoom, concept board, a lot of digital tools. Again, we're not here to kind of just pat you all on the back for that, but I am. That's my role as well. And I know that all of our reviewers are empathetic to that struggle. Maybe not the struggle of learning amid the pandemic, but certainly the struggle of when you're first introduced to digital tools. My last bit of introduction is I want to show the site. So we are, one moment. We have a site, although it is not a site-based project. But I think there's a little bit of context necessary. This is New Orleans that we're looking at with the Mississippi River. We are right here at Tulane University. You can see this kind of banding along the river. Again, this is not a site-based project, and we won't talk about the site in relationship to the city in any kind of specificity, but along the river, there's a series of warehouses kind of past the downtown that line the river that are now, that were formerly for shipping and are now for a mix of some of them are a mix of programs, some are storage, some are can be rented out, and some, like this one, Piety Wharf, which is our site, are part of a park. This is a bridge, the Rusty Rainbow Bridge by David Adjaye, and it's a new park. And I'll drop in here. You can see We've taken some liberties with the site, but basically this is the site, a rectangle here, 120 by 120 feet, with facing the river on three sides and facing a kind of park that then separates the site from the city. The site is important in the sense that we're not talking about connections or the fabric, urban fabric or any of that, but the site is important in that the square, the 120 by 120 square here is the students were constrained. There's loading on this side, which is kind of some unspecified truck route. This is a little where the hand waving starts to occur. And then a plaza that the students had to keep open here. So there's basically four separate sides to the site. One faces the plaza, which is for the most part the entry plaza. One faces a kind of loading side, and then two sides face the river with pretty dramatic views. There's some, again, we were fairly dismissive of the site, which is the focus of the next semester, but this gives a kind of orientation to the project. Also, there's a bit of tension because the archives are inherently an internalized program, which light and views aren't really part of the shelf. So there's a little bit of instant tension in that. And we will use the first project to, again, to explain that and give a little longer to the first project, which I'll share my screen in a sec. And Leah, I'm wondering, can you keep time for us?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll get started here in one moment. We have, we'll take, I think we need 2 breaks because just Zoom fatigue and all of that. So we have 12 students. We'll take a break after 4 students for about 15 minutes, and then after 8 students, and then the 4 remaining. So we have 3.5 hours, and we'll call it 3 hours with breaks. So that gives us 15 minutes per student. But let's shoot for, we need time for comments at the end and everything else. So let's shoot for 12 minutes per student. And that should include breaks. And Leah, if you can just check my math on that. Brant, Maria, Carrie, and Katie, again, probably some of this will just be explained in the first project, which we'll give a couple extra minutes to accommodate. But do you have is there any questions I can answer on any of this? Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you to Jace for going first. I will manage the concept board, which hopefully will stay up. And Jace, if you could just direct me to which board you want. I guess one other point, there's 2 rows at the top that represent earlier work. We don't have to look at that too much, but the students were asked to draw artifacts from the collection. So each student, you'll see 3 artifacts at the top that were part of the collection. And then as a gateway exercise before introducing the building requirements, studies in making space amid shelving. So what you're seeing, these kind of patterns are shelves. They were given a kind of sightless condition in which there was a field of shelves and asked to create open space, seating, gathering space amid those shelves. We won't talk about those, and in many cases, there's no direct link to the work. So we'll just talk about these 6 boards primarily, but I think these will help as you're browsing concept board to see kind of some of the types and range of artifacts in the collection and help imagine what might be on display at the and storage at the Twain Depot. So with that, Jace, thank you so much for going first. Please take it away.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jace, and the concept for my 2-lane depot design is the sacred space. And the sacred space sits in the middle of the depot, defining the separation between public and private space, or front of house and back of house, as we've been calling it, while functioning as a private space within the public realm. The sacred space is accessible to the public through open portals, and the privatization of the sacred space is achieved through various ceiling heights. The public space has an 11-foot ceiling, and the sacred space has a 14-foot ceiling, but the circulation around the sacred space has an 8-foot ceiling. The effect of this is that the circulation around the sacred space acts as a threshold through which the user moves from the public populated area and emerges into a room of shelves. The sacred space is a tranquil and still environment with floor to ceiling shelf walls surrounding the user with curiosities and removing him or her or anything else from the reality that surrounds the space.
And Jace, since everyone is new to this project, maybe the plan or isometric is the best place, but can you just kind of talk through some of the programs and how they're arranged that compose the back of house and front of house?
Sure. Yeah, so in the center is the sacred space, and the ring around that is the circulation with the 8-foot ceiling. And on the lower half, on the lower half of the sacred space is the public exhibition archive area, and you enter through the lobby, and you can just flow right into all of the shelving. And on the opposite side of the lobby, you have a public reading research area and some bathrooms. If you work at the depot, you enter through the lobby, and instead of going to your left, you go to your right, and you go through this hallway with meeting spaces and offices. And from there, you have access to the loading dock and the private storage area. And you can also enter the sacred space through the private space as well.
I would just have just a point of clarification. Jace, the sacred space is your concept and your definition. That's not every project has a sacred space.
Yeah, sorry, I've just been kind of calling it that. We'll call it the exhibition.
No, I think it's great. And just before we start talking about your project, this is where the students had a good amount of latitude to define what the exhibition or display or research areas what the character of those spaces would be like. And how they relate to the rest of the program. So it's a lot to jump into because there's a lot of program and a lot of pieces. But some of the issues that I would that the students and Jace, maybe you can speak to your experience as well. But some of the issues are just how to kind of deal with, like Jace said, the back of house versus front of house, the divisions between public and private, and the gray areas that exist in this project between public and private. What are the various thresholds, and how to give a sense of identity to a building that potentially could just be a warehouse. How to give some structure to a building that could otherwise be an undifferentiated field of shelves. And with that, I'm going to try and recede into the background.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure where I should pick up.
I think it'd be interesting to hear how the diagrams translated into your next step of where you came up with the sacred space concept.
Sure. The concept diagram, so the top left is just, I wanted to create, the goal was to create a space that the public and the private users of the building could both enjoy, as opposed to just having two dedicated spaces and no real gray area. And the goal was to just create a gray area where both realms of public and private could mesh together. And that was achieved through kind of this like a pokeball shape
Mhm.
and where the two spaces blend together directly in the middle.
Cool. I mean, I appreciate the clarity of the drawings and and the simplicity of the way you speak about the concept. And you know, it in some ways when you bring up sacred space, and especially with this, you know, square that's in the middle, it does kind of bring about all kinds of history of architecture, 9 square, and what is at the center. But what I appreciate is that you really thought about the program, and there's like, you know, this hugging, and it is more of a like ring or donut idea. I think that whenever someone says sacred space, it reminds me of like the opposite of sacred in architecture history. You say sacred space, then you say, well, what's the profane? And it's interesting if you really kind of like dug into that with this, these kind of like weird jars and like what maybe isn't on display, you know, or like what are there things that are like smelly or gross, or, you know, and then like what would be like the experience of looking at something in this very like sacred, you know, then is the museum goer like the kind of sacredness that you're like putting on these white gloves, you know, and you're like, you know, slowly looking at these archival moments with precision. I think that you know, architecturally speaking, the spaces that you've defined like make sense to me. They're logical, like it's clearly drawn. But I guess I would say I want you to like push that concept and like keep digging and keep getting idiosyncratic moments, or and also like I love these fun funky colors of the artifacts, but they're all blobs, and like I think that just getting into the specific nature could start to break things open. And while there's clarity, there's a lot of uniformity, and I'm sure that with I don't know how many thousands of artifacts of fish that there are probably the same exact size jars, for instance. But I assume that there's actually a lot of diversity. So, you know, you guys did this shelving study, and I wonder if, you know, some shelves not only need to be like shorter and taller, but I'm sure maybe even some of them need more depth. And I think that zone that you talk about that right now just looks like, you know, this, you know, 8-foot hallway or 10-foot hallway or whatever it is that kind of gives that buffer to the sacred zone. Like I'm really curious about that wall and the thickening, and if some areas would want to push, you know, and become smaller, and other areas could become larger. Because another thing that comes to mind when I hear sacred is that usually when there's a sacred space, there's like a procession that allows you to go into that sacred space. So it's like a series of events that kind of prepares you for this very, you know, sacred moment. And so the fact that you can go in on all sides, you know, on all 4 different, you know, sides at the center, it doesn't give any specificity there. And while I appreciate the logic and the clarity, like architecturally, I think that if you built in the narrative, you'd start to see these spaces shift and become more specific.
I agree. I think that what I'm curious about is the diagrams above the rationalized one, where you kind of have your sacred space and then the kind of back of house and front of house. But I see these diagrams and I see kind of like these mixing chambers, which is kind of how you're describing your sacred space. It's a space where all different people come together to interact with these objects in different ways. And I think in a space like this, I want to kind of navigate the architecture in like kind of a surprising way, because the objects themselves are kind of surprising. I kind of want to have a journey through the space. And when I see these other diagrams, I still see these little mixing chambers, these little nodes of sacred spaces. But I think you've kind of distilled it down to like a logical idea, which is beautiful and functional. But I think that with a little bit more interrogation, like Brant said, of your concept, you could get a lot more complexity. And really just looking at the objects and seeing how they can influence your spaces. in general. So I think that's, even though the blobs are super cute, I want to see like drawings of the objects and how they start to kind of mold into the shelving and become on display and also hidden and discovered throughout the space. But great drawings and clear concept for sure.
Jace, yeah, I think these are great comments. I agree with all of them so far, especially the clarity of the organization. And I also really appreciate the thinking through threshold, the in section. It's such a planimetric project, so to see you starting to explore how you can differentiate the same volume of space sectionally, I think is a really terrific development. So I really appreciate the sort of expansion and contraction of space that you're exploring. I agree with the comments about sort of increasing the experience through the procession. I think to call this space sacred suggests that it's somewhat kind of hidden, or there's a bit of a journey to get there. And so from the lobby to sort of already have an alignment with the space seems a missed opportunity. I wonder if the whole project just rotated 90 degrees such that the shelving fronted the plaza, and so you had to move through the sort of like labyrinth or the rows of shelving and then arrive at the kind of sacred space. So it's a little bit of a hidden cloister rather than a sort of space that you interface right up against the lobby. So all of these are just sort of, comments for further development should you have, another month on the project. I know it was really quick. So with that in mind, I just want to congratulate you on the sort of degree of clarity that is very present in the work and the level that you've kind of developed it since the last time I saw it, which is really terrific.
Thank you.
We have 2 minutes.
I'm really interested in the way that you sort of arrange the different scales of objects. Just looking at your sacred space, like all of the different cubbies that you have would sort of promote like a certain side of sidedness within your blobs, which I kept thinking about what Brant had said about sort of being more specific within what the object would be, because they seem like they're sort of like the repetitive form of the cubicle would imply that the sort of objects are similar in either size or theme or etc. So I think it would be interesting to see how that could be occupied, contrasted with the sort of individual pedestals that you have. Like I think there's an interesting mix of scales going on with the objects inside of your sacred space.
Yeah, the logic behind, or the idea behind these kind of ambiguous blobs was I wasn't really sure what I wanted to put in the shelves, and I wanted to leave a little bit of like a moment for interpretation and have an outlet to add a little bit of color and a little bit of life to the drawings.
I mean, I see that for sure. And I appreciate it. And I like that there is color. But I think if you only had, let's say, an hour and you wanted to put this in your portfolio, I think even doing something as simple as like allowing some of them to just be stupid cylinders, and varied colors, or even cubes. But their blobbiness, is so unique, but yet they're trying to be generic. So just diversity. Of course, if you had months, it'd be awesome to intricately, design and draw up all of the really idiosyncratic stuff. But yeah, right now, when you look at that, I see the motivation of color. But I think you could, take it even a step further that makes you think that you were thinking about changing the size of them or of the shelving in comparison to them, and so on and so forth.
That's time.
These are fantastic comments. I'm going to withhold my withhold, feedback here, but just fantastic comments. Jace, thank you for going first and wonderful work.
Thank you.
Again, as the reviewers have said. Leah, are you going to use the timer in? Can you use the timer in concept board, or will we see it if you use it? I wonder. Okay, yeah, we see it. Great.
Okay.
So Benny, so I think everyone you'll see it on my screen. I should see it on your screen as well. Benny, please.
Hi, my name is Benny Bailey, and the two-lane depot represents a separation between a public gallery and a private office and archive spaces. My project explores a divide in the program between the front and back of house. The large exhibition room in the middle serves as a destination, a meeting room, large display, and the joint combining public and private spaces. It is the collision of offices, research, and the main gallery. Incorporating a circular exhibition space within a strict grid of zones breaks the theme and structure of the building. This is a space where events could be held and an opportunity to showcase something grand. If we take a look at the second perspective drawing, there is a clear alignment of pedestals and shelving, which allows for organic and natural formed pathways and circulation. The floor to ceiling glass facade emphasizes the importance of natural light and a clear view into the archive through transparency.
And Benny, maybe you want to say just where these two views are taken from in plan and what we're looking at.
So perspective one is taken from the entrance of the building. So you're looking directly through the entryway right there through the glass facade, and you see into the structure and into the center cylindrical dome, if you call it. And the second perspective is taken on right at the end towards the beginning of the loading dock and the plaza, and you look through the main gallery space of the structure.
I guess I'll jump in. I'm seeing that time, that the timer really does help. I think, this, can you talk or at least say a little bit about, like, let's say that, because that's the killer whale, right? Is that one that Tulane actually has? Like, do you have a history behind that or any of the objects that kind of motivated this?
The killer whale, or that is not something from a Tulane archive. I want the concept itself is centered around like this big exhibition room in the middle. And so there needed to be something that showcased how grand of an idea and a concept this is. And so through the use of this large killer whale or orca, it's kind of a representation of something amazing. And so although it's not something from the Tulane archive, I decided that this would be the best to showcase this concept.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that struck me in the drawings, so the killer whale struck me, and then the section that you have where you're showing the water and even, bits of things that are below. Is there a connection between your project and, let's say, the life that's currently in the water? Or are there any openings?
That's a good observation. I didn't think of that. So there's no actual correlation between the fishes, but it's a cool idea.
I saw on the previous person's project too. I think there was like a dog in the gallery as well. I think that like putting those things in drawings, like we do see her cat. We do see those things, and like they can actually like really confirm your project. And I know that like this is you've had 3 projects this semester, so you haven't really had a lot of time to reflect yet. But, you know, inevitably in architecture, a lot of times we draw things just because exactly what you said. I needed a big thing in there because this is a grand space. You know, maybe you found a 3D killer whale easily online and you put it in the drawings, but actually, you know, take that sometimes seriously, because it can really start to inform and change the way you see the project. And the fact that you're putting attention into this life below, I mean, it made me think, wouldn't it be amazing if like part of this dock was, you know, blown open and you had more of a connection between, you know, what happened below and specimen that are kind of, you know, archived in a way and then living. So again, I think that the drawings are beautiful and it seems very clear, your concept, and that, like, kudos for sure. But it's like, I want to see what's kind of eccentric or unique or different about this specific project. And to me, those 2 moments really struck out in the drawings.
I agree. There's something about this project that's looking outward more than the other one. The other one was kind of an inward focus, even though you also have, you know, the same kind of like focal space, not a sacred space, but similar. But the Florida, the emphasis on the big windows and kind of putting the artwork out in the public realm on the plaza. This one seems to be more rooted in its place. So, but I would invite you to interrogate that more too. And that is a really interesting point about the section. You know, you're really drawing that hovering space over the water, and I'm wondering like what that means to you as a designer, like playing with that context. So I think internally the plan is beautiful. It is logical. I do like that your mixing chamber is kind of in between two realms, and it is exciting. But I would say that interrogating the site a little bit more would be really, really interesting for this one.
Hi, Benny. These are great comments. When I look at your scheme, I sort of am most intrigued, or I think the greatest potential is in the sort of layering of these spaces that the, what do we call it? The killer whale space affords. It's straddling, right? So it's a strategy that's sort of partially in the private area, partially in the public area, and the opportunity to insert this sort of glass room that is sort of 1 foot in one space, 1 in the other, is to provide these kind of glimpses into these other worlds. So it behaves as a sort of like lens that you can like start to get these kind of peeks into these other worlds that you might not have access to. And so one perspective that I think is missing is the one that's either from the shelving private area or from the public area, kind of looking all the way through. And so that you're kind of getting the sort of collapse of all of those worlds through the insertion of this kind of glass viewing chamber, or the view from being inside of it, and like the sort of maybe, you know, 360 where your eye is, you're sort of being able to capture a little bit of both. Sort of there's a little bit of a opportunity to sort of like glimpse what you might not, what you kind of shouldn't, or what you don't like. Visual access, but not physical access, could be a kind of interesting way of describing the project, both kind of verbally but also visually. So for your portfolio, I think the one view that I would add is one that sort of starts to really leverage the opportunities that this kind of straddling and plan affords visually.
Yeah, I agree with Carrie. That moment is really interesting because of the way that it bridges the private and public access. And I'm kind of struck by, honestly, like the structure grid that you have going on here, that it's kind of like this circle just put within like this really set grid. And I think there could have been an opportunity to have the more private program maybe like more strictly follow that grid. So the circle really is like kind of completely independent. Because right now I think the classrooms and everything, like especially in that upper left classroom, like there's a column in the middle of those desks. So like if maybe the private program was more intentional about the way that it interacted with the column grid, and then the circle was kind of where everything, the column grid didn't matter as much in that sense, like that juxtaposition could be made maybe a bit more clear.
I should add too, I failed to mention the column grid was given to all the students and required of them, which I think you're interpreting.
Yeah, I mean, but I agree with the comment though. Like, how do you negotiate with that? And I also saw, like, while I love the drawings, kind of they're the various line weights because they have this kind of beautiful depth to them with just black lines, and I love that. But if you go to the section, there's some stuff that's kind of a little confusing to me. Like maybe it's the columns that maybe are a little too dark because they're behind, like there's a wall that's in front of them. So, those should be darker than the columns that are behind, because right now it looks like some things are like hanging from the ceiling and the roof seems like really, really thin. And I know that you mentioned, you kind of slipped up, you said cylinder / dome. I don't know if you actually did think that that cylindrical space had a dome on top of it, but obviously I couldn't find out if that's what you were thinking,
We have a minute.
in the section. But so like just going back over and like rereading the drawings and the line weights could also clarify something.
We only have 30 seconds here. So, but Benny, these are great comments. And I know you've wrestled and struggled with everything that was brought up, from what do you identifying and defining this space, and the use of the term dome and so forth, to struggles with the line weight. And I just want to say, Benny, this represents to me a really remarkable trajectory from where you began this project to where you ended up. And I know that you still have kind of conflicted thoughts about where you landed, but to me, it just is an incredible amount of accomplishment. And I hope and expect it sets you up really well for your future projects. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Hello, I'm Andrew. The two-lane depot combines all of Tulane's archives into a singular hub of display and research.
Andrew, it's a bit difficult for me to hear you. Maybe you want to try and speak close to the microphone or speak louder if possible.
Okay. Two-lane depot combines all of Tulane's archives into a singular hub of display and research. This project prioritizes the research aspect. Research is king, as seen through the central location and plan, as well as the punctured roof seen in the first perspective. Much like the rebellious tree that breaks through the jungle's canopy, the researchers benefit from the increased access to natural light as one of 3 programmatic volumes that are placed seemingly haphazardly, yet separate public display from private shelving in a way that feels unobtrusive to the patron.
Andrew, it was a bit of I caught most of that, but I also know your project already, so it was a bit of a struggle to hear you.
Did you say something about rebellious
Jungle tree.
jungle? Like, can you repeat that line?
Yeah, sorry. Much as the rebellious tree breaks through the jungle's canopy, the research room breaks through the ceiling of the entire volume to allow more natural light in to aid the researchers.
Okay, yeah, okay, I see.
Andrew, I think that's sort of a very compelling guiding framework, but something that I think might help make that your project or design kind of your driver more legible is taking a close look at that starting image. What makes that tree rebellious is its degree to which it's an exception. So it relies on the other trees to be at such a common height and common, right? That, let's talk about all that's common about it. It's common height, probably common species, common color. All of these things are contribute to that single tree that's you know, accentuated by its extra height. Maybe it's also a different species. Its canopy is a little bit unique. It becomes an exception, but an exception relies on a kind of the degree of sameness by which it is exceptional. And so that's where I kind of want to focus discussion on your plan. I think, you know, you've tapped into a very kind of interesting starting point, but I think the way in which you've resolved the project could benefit from more discipline and a lot more sameness, so that that space that you're talking about rebelling, that space in the middle, that in section is a little bit higher, can be the exception, can be that sort of special moment that you've described. But currently in plan, you're contending with a lot of sort of jogs, particularly right, or like things that are sort of misaligned. So I think bringing the same rigor that you develop in section, in plan, right? So in section, you know, your room breaks the ceiling plane just like your tree image, but then I would step back and in plan start to inventory all of the alignments, all of the kind of spatial types, right? You have closed rooms, you have open shelving, you have conference glass, you have all of these types, and I would probably edit all of those types to be fewer, so that again, the room that you want to break the rule is breaking a rule. But right now it's sort of like a collection of different type of spaces, different proportion spaces, different material spaces, so that it doesn't in plan really behave so much like an exception that it is doing in section, or that it's not behaving as an exception in plan as much as it is in section. And I would try to really wrangle with it operating as an exception in both.
I agree. When I look at the section, like the only change that I see is the height, which I get, like, you know, you're trying to bring in light, you're thinking about it from like a human experience, being different in that space. But I want you to think about it as a formal experience. Like this tree that's exploding on its own is vibrant and it's exciting because it's standing out. And so you need to integrate your architectural form and your use of shapes. Everything is just very linear, which is beautiful, but is very rational. But I would invite you to explore different types of form.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with how Carrie tried to break that down, because I think that architecture can very much be like poetic, and here you are, kind of your starting place is from this image and this inspiration that also has like talking about it being rebellious. It is, you know, poetry, and she really kind of gave you examples for how we might think of that in architecture using material and tectonics and spatial relationships. And so, you know, it would be much easier to be able to look at an image like that and a starting place like that if it's really clear in the architecture. And that would be really exciting. I want to commend you for some variation in the floor plan, and like seeing some stuff in section that looks like you're not just trying to like pop off your area. Or I'm not now in plan, I'm not really seeing stairs, but in this section, I thought that maybe we were, you know, raising up to this. Yeah, you are. So again, maybe in the plan, I would see where there would be a line where you have to step up or a few stairs or even a ramp, and I would understand that. And as well, like if you have a very specific, exciting moment that's popping up, we use the line type, the dashed line to show hidden things. So if this section is cut in a place and you're looking in a direction where the pop-up is behind you, if it's really significantly architecturally, you might want to dash in where that would be. Because I don't know whether it's on this side or the opposite side. It seems weird that we wouldn't cut through it in the section below. So just, I appreciate that you are like really thinking of this things, not just, planimetrically, but in section. And I really agree with Carrie's comment about, if you want something to seem rebellious or different or diverse, then everything else does kind of need to be, similar. So it really punches through.
Yeah, I agree with the previous comments as well. But I did want to point out, like, you have so many little interesting moments within each of your little zones. Like on the bottom left, you have like that sort of, I can't tell if it's classroom volume or something puncturing into the conference. And then I think there's a lot of thought within each little zone that you made. And I really do appreciate how you're sort of like bringing up the research part of this on a pedestal and kind of allowing the public like a glimpse into those areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, it seems like there's like, even on the top right, that area where there's people sitting on a bench, there was this whole wave in architecture of your living room being this kind of like hangout space where, you might descend into it and it creates this pit where you could, have more intimate encounters and sit across from someone. It usually was more, I wouldn't say circular, but just there might be people that you could look at across those squares. And I like that kind of bringing that hangout zone, if you will, into a place like a depot. So, I said this in the first project, but maybe I just repeat, and maybe it's that you've had 3 projects this semester, but building that narrative and like really understanding, what those zones are, of course, architecturally, but narratively, when you talk about the hangout zone, and then we're able to like see it and talk about the architectural moments that create that hangout zone will be exciting. So building on the narrative and what it's like to actually be in there and experience it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that because conversation pits are definitely a big inspiration.
I didn't catch that, Andrew. What did you say?
I said conversation pits were definitely a big inspiration for me.
Yeah, I'm thinking Neutra in California, these little hangout zones. I could see it. But yeah, I think if you wrapped it and like, how do you get down there? What are, especially thinking about all of these odds and ends that you're collecting, like, how do you incorporate that stuff? We talk about conversation pieces, like what are those like coffee table kind of things that are in the middle there? Like that could be a lot of fun to go hang out in that space and chill.
Andrew, these are great comments and certainly things we've talked about, and I imagine you recognize or are not surprised by a number of these comments, such as what the reviewers have talked about in terms of there's fantastic moments and they're full of potential, and the struggle to make them work together and add up to more than some of the parts is a big challenge, and one I know that you've struggled with a lot. But it's fantastic work, and I'm glad you were able to generate this level of conversation. Thank you, Andrew. That is our third, right? So we have one more, and then we take a break, I believe. So is that right, Leah? We're taking a break after this one?
Yeah, like a 10-minute break.
A 10-minute break. Okay, great. Sophia, please.
Hi, my name's Sophia, and in the brief, the archives are allowed the largest square footage and are an integral part of the building. Therefore, with this project, I sought to develop visitor experience through the shelving in the archive space. The shelves swoop from pedestal height upon entry up to over 15 feet at the farthest corner. This enables an initial line of sight of the entire archive. As one moves deeper into the archives, the space becomes increasingly dense with shelving. Cut out from the shelves are alveolar spaces that accommodate different functions as well as varying levels of privacy due to the shelving height surrounding it. The archives subsequently manipulate viewers' experience as they explore the space. The brief is organized around a front of house and a back of house. The back of house is situated in a bar on the loading dock side, allowing the front of house a large rectangular space to showcase the archives and exhibit. The outdoor perimeter of the front of house is floor-to-ceiling glass, so visitors get a glimpse of the interior experience from the outside, as well as providing views of the river and the city from the interior.
And reviewers and/or Sophia presenters, if there's any drawings you want me to zoom on, just let me know. I'm running that.
Well, I'll just kick it off to say that Sophia, I think there's so many exciting aspects to your scheme. I think you've really considered how the perspective can be such a great asset to a presentation. I think these bottom views are particularly successful, especially in a project which plan and section kind of can't completely tell the story of the sort of landscape that you've created through the sort of topographic shelving scheme. And so just to kind of linger on these views for a moment. I think what's exciting about it is you hint at rooms, and you can see that. And I think your strategy of going from low to high relative to the entry was a smart one, because from the entry and from these views, you're getting a glimpse that there are rooms within this this kind of field. And so, right, if they had all been at the same height, you might not be kind of enticed to explore those spots. So you give just enough of a glimpse that there are rooms within this field. And so I just point that out, that I think that's a really lovely strategy. I really appreciate the sort of reciprocation of the sort of skylight to also sort of introduce or reinforce that kind of column of space that becomes inscribed through both the sort of cut in the shelving and then reinforced by the cut in the ceiling. So I just really appreciate the sectional play of the display shelves. The heights offer some privacy as well. So I think that can start to really play into the sort of curation of the object. So moving from, objects that, or the spacing of the objects, right? Because as soon as it becomes maybe a more kind of singular experience or a more private experience, you can think about how that has a relationship with the objects on display. What are you looking at? We've had these kind of lines of conversation beginning with Jace's project, where maybe now the next step would be kind of more specificity on the objects themselves. But I just wanted to kick it off with sincere appreciation for the scheme.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by this one. I think that what you're doing is you're treating the space like an object itself by making this large move across the room. And I think that that's really interesting because you're creating a sculptural architectural object that's for and reacting to the objects that it houses. It's also creating a landscape that the human experience, you can just navigate in a really exciting way. And I also find that you're reacting to that context a little bit with this kind of wave of a field with the Mississippi River right next to it. I think that when you would approach this site from the plaza, there would be a lot of intrigue to enter that space and really dig into those objects. So I think it's a really simple approach, but very, very sophisticated. The only thing I would say is I think that maybe if we could have some more of a view experience when you come right into the plaza, I want to like kind of see that that sculpture emerge immediately and then sort of slowly dig into it. So I just think with a little bit more iteration and how this object sits inside the space and plays with the context around it, it can really go in only good directions. It's really nice.
Yeah, I'm interested in how you sort of turn the stacks typology like on its head and created this like new sort of form when you walk in. Um, and especially like the degrees of privacy, like from this perspective, you can see like people slowly disappearing as they go further back. So like, I think like especially in a program that's normally like very serious and repetitive, it's like a bit of playfulness within that. And I think makes it more engaging to like a viewer who's maybe not initially so interested in like a catalog of objects, but it makes it like a bit more accessible in that way.
Yeah, I mean, great project. I'm also very intrigued by the logic and the form making and the experiential quality of going in between these shelves. And I appreciate that, using the Boolean and like, there's a complexity there, but you've kind of been really simple with the landscape, and you've just, it just is going from like a low point to a high point. It doesn't have these huge blobs or anything. And I think that takes like a level of constraint. And it works really well. So I think when you first enter and seeing this view, and that privacy that you get as you talk about like a sacred space that's created. I mean, you want to get to that column, as Carrie talked about it, the like void or the negative column, if you will. And then I wonder, like, not to make it more complex, but I do wonder if there's any kind of like dipping in that area as well, because it does seem really special and unique as another plan section. But it's a beautiful, beautiful project. I guess the thing that I would say is that the like back of house is like totally just like tacked on to this amazing museum moment. And I appreciate that it's like, it's probably very rational and logical, and here's the loading dock and, like very, very to the order. But I feel like you could, like, you have an amazing concept, an amazing mind for this. And I wonder if there is maybe a simple way, maybe it's materials, but that this thing doesn't seem just like there's an appendage, but is part of it, is part of this project. And yeah, great job. It's hard, of course, to be looking on the Zoom, and it's moments like these where it's like you see a really, really strong concept and it played out really well architecturally. You see it, in perspective and plan and section, and it's like you want the drawings to be on the wall and like stand up, like really look at them closely. But wonderful project. I really appreciate the way you've thought about this. And yeah, nice job.
Thank you.
One last comment is I think this project also kind of works really well with the column grid. We can see that in the perspective where I think there's also been kind of rigor with where the column falls, but at the same time, if it was falling a bit more sporadic, relative to the kind of field of shelving and the voids created with them, I also think it would work. So I just wanted to mention that I appreciate the sort of consideration for the column grid, that it doesn't fall in the aisles, right? Because that would be sort of problematic. But you calibrated the sort of shelving to the column grid and as well as the back of house. You can also, I mean, this may come up repeatedly with all the students, but see where the back of house walls don't quite fully absorb the columns. You know, those are cases in which you can simply thicken the wall so that the column would fall within the wall, and you wouldn't have these sort of moments of bump out in the wall, which you really wouldn't want. So you know, you're offered a sort of consistent or standard wall dimension, right? Like 6-inch interior, I forget, a 12-inch exterior. But you can also, of course, those are just starting points, and you can start to elaborate upon those.
And I was noticing the column grid as well, Carrie, and noticing that the sacred space just like got rid of the column. And I think that's, and I'm calling it sacred space, but the void, the really amazing moment towards the back of the shelving. And like, you know, for a project where you have 3 projects in one semester, of course, but I wonder, like, if this was actually the concept of a real architectural project, this might be like the first thing that maybe one of many schemes that you show a client, but then right away you'd probably go to a structural engineer and be like, we want to get rid of this column and blow a hole through, you know what I mean? The roof of this thing. Like, how do we do this? And, you know, what would probably happen is you'd need to have some kind of like diaphragm, like girder. And then you might need to thicken the columns that would then take the load, you know? And so, you know, it ends up that eventually there might be a play in the roof to like account for that. And then that would, you know, change the space. So, thinking ahead, like I saw that and thought, I just love the clear, clean concept. But, you know, once you start getting into the structures classes and you have longer time for your projects, even starting to think that next move would be really great.
We're out of time, but Sophia, it's a fantastic project. As the reviewer said, there's lots of clarity. That's maybe even at a small scale, such as not small scale, but just graphically, that there's the circular opening and the circular front desk is kind of foreground and background. These little moves like that really help give depth, give clarity, give contrast, give structure, and even just the detail of taking the time to draw out the pencil and the computer, the front desk. Helps this space feel less abstract. It gives us a sense of scale, clarity about the entry. There's this kind of very human scale in the foreground, and in the background we have this kind of I don't know what to call it anymore, dome sacred, you know, opening. But I'd love to talk about it more. We got to take a break. Sophia, thank you so much. I just want to point out one more thing too. We don't have the sections here, but this evolved. The clarity of this project evolved from these plans were always undulating in section, and it's been great to see it evolve. So let's take a 10-minute break. Right now we're at 10:17. Let's come back and start up sharp at 10:27. Brandon, I know you're at a different time, but I'm just gonna ignore that. we're at 17 now. We'll come back at 27. Yes. Thank you. All right, let's start back up. And we'll have one more break after the next four projects. Let's see. And Leah, you're still okay keeping time? I'll start the timer on this one. Or Leah, did you say, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I just nodded my head, but
Oh, okay. Sorry, I have a lot of windows here. Jaime, please kick us off.
Hi, my name is Jaime. So front of house and back of house each have distinct orders within which people interact with the space, but there exists a spectrum as to how the two can be organized. And so in this plan, it's divided into three main bands, each successive band filtering the spaces from public to private while moving back with increasing organization. The plan starts out with a whimsical and loose space that's very open and then becomes more structured and organized as you progress through. These bands are divided by manageable thresholds that delineate between public and habitation and private work. So the first band houses the exhibition and lobby, a space that's fully open to the public. Upon entering this band, visitors are greeted by an interactive playground of artifact display and programmatic spaces. The long and continuous pedestals that extend into the space create programs such as reading nooks and benches. And so the loose configuration of the front of house promotes people to be interactive and to familiarize themselves within the environment. The second band is 3 feet above ground level and houses the private archive. Raising this space allows for the public to see what goes on in the archives, but restricts them from handling the artifacts, effectively making the archives visibly public, but the circulation within it private. Programmatic spaces are also carved into this band from the exhibition, such as the auditorium space, which you can see at the bottom of the plan, the staircase, which is towards the middle, and then the ramp, which is towards the top. The third band houses the back of house facilities. And so the back of house is much more structured and grid-like to accommodate for the needs of the workers that inhabit the space. Instead of negotiating for room, these spaces work together to make the transition between the zones cohesive. The organization of each band reflects how those specific people use the space and ultimately how they inhabit the depot.
Jaime, can you just say what we're looking at in each of the perspectives?
Yeah, so that's the front entrance of the depot. Front desk would be there with some of the pedestals, and then I have a hanging whale in my plan. I have a hanging whale in my depot because I think it makes a really cool spectacle for the fun sort of loose environment that's in the front of house lobby. And so then the second perspective is a view from the top of the plan looking down towards the river. So like the back of the whale.
Can you just reiterate what you were saying about privacy? I see that that second band that you go up, I think you said 3 feet, and you said that it was for privacy. Can you explain that to me more?
Yeah, so I put the second band 3 feet above ground level because that's where the private shelving is for the researchers. And so I raised the space just so that people who are visiting the depot, like the public, can see what goes on in the archives, but they're restricted from like touching the artifacts. So it's like visibly public, but they're not allowed inside the space.
So the public don't go up those stairs or up the ramp?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I really enjoy the axon drawing of the plan. If you go up in plan, I kind of found that the lines were a little bit more sparse, but when I see them here, I'm intrigued about the transitions. I find that, you know, maybe there isn't like a physical barrier, like, you know, somebody might want to go up that ramp, but they might want to go up those stairs, but there is kind of a language that kind of lets you know, hey, you're in a public space versus, you know, you're in a archive space versus a working space. So I think you could continue to interrogate that as like a gradient of a language and organization of space. I'm pretty intrigued by this one. I think it's definitely taking an approach of like, you know, segregating spaces, but it's doing it in a way that is still exciting and interesting from a person's experience. So, and really beautiful drawings.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, Katie, I would even go as much to say it's not so much segregating spaces, but rather delineating them, because you can kind of physically occupy. So it's sort of like that killer whale circle project we saw, where you sort of can you have that opportunity to straddle. And so, you know, I think what's sort of very sophisticated, Jaime, or shall I say your name, you should always include your name on, if you do into plan, for instance, it says your name. So just you know, a little nothing there. But I think what's very sophisticated is the play between the plan and the section. So that you can actually kind of physically occupy space and plan that may be delineated for a different user type. But in section, we see that you actually are kind of, or in Axon, we can see that, like, for instance, the auditorium space or that sort of small little amphitheater space is sort of sectionally distinct. And so I think these are really kind of fundamental design kind of tactics, the sort of control or manipulation of plan and sectional space strategies. And it's really terrific to see the kind of degree of control that you're exercising. I also really appreciate, if you zoom into the plan, the ways in which these sort of wiggles are operating. In some cases, as we see toward the lower portion, they're creating rooms. And in other cases, they are sort of meant to kind of pass by. So you're sort of engaging the user, I think, in sort of three ways, which I think is successful: by spaces that you kind of pass by, spaces in which you can kind of huddle or linger, and then the third being the kind of auditorium where you actually kind of may have sort of more formal, a more formal event take place. And so you sit there, you linger for even longer. So those sort of three scales of time that is also suggested by these spaces, or these types of display, catering to the sort of passerby, the lingerer, and then the sort of event, I think is also just a great range. And so I just want to point that out too.
Yeah, I mean, I love this project. I love the concept. I think it's clear, and you've obviously had a lot of fun figuring things out. And I appreciate the way you're thinking about the privacy of the back of house and the researchers. And I feel like what you've set up, though, just offers, I mean, as Carrie is kind of saying, like, you're delineating space, but like it actually, I think there could even be more gray areas. I love the plan. And then I also just love the axon. So if we could go to that axon, I feel like if I visited this place, I would absolutely want to go up the ramp and up the stairs as just someone who's experiencing this. And I just feel like, and can I draw on this? I feel like, I think I can. I feel like if this area here, for instance, was just like a glass wall, and by the way, the axon looks a little bit different than the plan, in that, like, the plan, it looks like there's a hallway here, but I don't think there is. And I kind of like I kind of like thinking that researchers can go in from this side, and you literally could be like standing here, you know what I mean? And see what they're doing, and possibly even having like access to what's on like this space of the shelf, right? So you feel like you really, you know, and it's obviously been delineated as to like things that the public can view closely and things that the public can't, and like things that are really on display, you know, in the front zone that's smaller. I just feel like you actually have this system that has like a lot more kind of gray areas, and this zone here to like hang out and feel more private. Like these are the people that might spend 2 hours, you know, in this, you know, depot rather than somebody who's just coming in for a half hour or so on and so forth. And I just feel like you've set up a number of organizational systems. And if we go back to the plan, I think that you could even like work at it to be more true and like be specific about, I love how the lines carry over here. And if they're not going to carry over here, you know, like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's in the floor pattern or, you know, like, or if you just try to make it work. But I actually like, I love looking at this line here and thinking about the various ways you've configured that system to migrate and shift and change. And you would never see it in just the plan. You know, you have to see it in section or in axon. And likewise, you know, with that kind of, you know, idea about where a hallway is and where, you know, glass could be, like I was suggesting, or something like that. I feel like you could have a totally different view that really sets up the organization and plan, and then experientially it really provides that safety and difference in use. But what you've set up is a really a great project. So yeah, nice work.
I have one more comment. I'll be super brief, which is, Jaime, you've done this sort of really fantastic job of delineating these spaces almost in kind of equivalent thirds, but the one that maybe has been the most ignored, and I know site wasn't really like a major driver of the project, but you have this fourth. So it's not really thirds, it's quarters. And so yeah, just building off of what Brant's saying, like, I think these could start to bleed into and have almost like confetti out in this space. And it's the most sort of to use your words, whimsical or playful. And that becomes sort of plaza furniture, plaza floor material, and so forth. I'm gonna hand it off to the other jurors.
The directionality is also really interesting, just like if you're a visitor walking through it, the way that you've sort of arranged these different stacks, you're kind of forcing the viewer to kind of look at every part of the exhibit. Like when you're in the middle, just like the way that you're oriented towards an object makes you look that way, the way that your sort of cutouts have sort of oriented the view this way. Like, I think it's very interesting how you sort of frame those views. And also I just appreciate in the drawing how detailed you got into the public part, like even by putting like the outlines of the objects and dashing in the whale and the little fishes in the plan, and really articulating that public space versus the private space.
Yeah, we're over time, but yeah, Jaime, it's very accomplished, and I think it was maybe Brant who said it shows that you had fun in this, and also masks how much struggle you went through. I know there were a lot of you know, the kind of proverbial blood, sweat, and tears in this, and it's just wonderful to see it come together. I think it sets up all these possibilities. I love your comment, your offhand comment just recently, that it starts to look like a beach with like seaweed, and you know, I feel like the kind of floodgates opened at the end of this project, full of possibilities. I'm not sure why we have such a nautical or marine biological theme. Perhaps because the fish archive. I love it. We had conversations. My pointed comments were about making sure the fish faced this way, so it didn't look like the whale was chasing them, because this is a baleen whale and it doesn't actually eat fish. So I mentioned that kind of anecdote just to say it's these things are, I think as one of the jurors said earlier, they are in some sense kind of a peripheral idea, but in another sense, these are the things when you get your project at that level, these things start to really matter. And that's really exciting. And it becomes not just about making the plan work, but really setting up something where we want to go, we imagine our own possibilities. I want to be a curator of that project. Thank you very much, Jaime.
Thank you.
Sabrina, please take it away.
Hello, my name is Sabrina. The concept shown in the diagram is a snail in which the zones of program transition from more public space to more private space, with the opportunity for both front of house and back of house to become more open through movement of accordion doors. The heart of the two-lane depot, which is mostly an educational facility, is the open and collaborative office space located centrally to the plan and surrounded by a promenade which emphasizes the mass of the processing and research volume as one walks around the entire and to enter through a large mobile glass facade. Majority of the back of house is encased in glass to allow for the visiting viewers to see the guts of the operation behind the curation of public display pedestals, which do not exceed a 3 feet height. The pedestal shelf high bridge, which with inset seats, minimize the daunt of the research space and encourage more engagement with the displays. The promenade and accordion doors on entry and in the office space also allow for customization and ventilation and curation as large parties or conferences can take place, as well as provide a private viewing area of the river.
Can you talk about the snail diagram a little bit more?
Yes. So for the plan, the entry is, what's highlighted includes loading dock areas, so that would be walking, but entry plaza included with this front porch area or wraparound promenade goes into the public space. And there's two modes of entry once you're inside the public space. There's one immediately as you turn right to go into the office, or there's one in the back in which you can hold consultations with people in the office about archive items. So that's where there's crossover between public and private space. And then it goes into the office space, which is more private.
And Sabrina and others, if you find it helpful, you're welcome, and reviewers, feel free to mark up using the concept board, pens, tools, highlighters, and so forth.
Could you talk a bit more about your section? I think in section A, there's like some interesting level changes or height changes going on in the back of house part.
Yeah, so because there's many accordion doors and availability for movement of the curated space, the level change just indicates that this is a walking area, since this is a very large open joint working space. It just allows division of the space.
I'm really stuck on the snail diagram because I find it very interesting, and like I can see it in the plan. It's this progression of public to private, and private is the smallest, most inner part, or at least conceptually it is, and then the public is larger and on the perimeter. I find that to be a really novel approach to a progression of space. I guess you could say it's like the Guggenheim, but that's just a spiral. This is about privacy and space getting more condensed. So I'm interested in, I'm starting to see it in the plan, but I think that can be really interrogated a little bit more and sort of like as you start to carve out these spaces. I mean, it's of course very rectilinear. You start to play with curves with your desk, which I like. But I think that a little bit more kind of soft transitions as you go into that more private space could be really interesting. But overall, I think it's a very effective strategy. I'm just not sure that it translated into an architectural form that I'm particularly excited about. I think I would love to be on this river with those big doors looking out and also looking in at these objects. But I just think you could interrogate your initial diagram a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I agree, Sabrina. I really understand the diagram to include the entry plaza as a sort of primary participant in the design, which is an area that I would say your project currently sort of underutilizes that space. So for that to really behave, I think, in the way that you are envisioning, I would activate that plaza. And it's a little bit of a cheap shot. I know you guys weren't really focused on the plaza or the site at large, but I think to kind of align the goals that you have for the project, particularly with your concept diagram, I would fold the plaza into the scope of your design. And I think for you, the plaza, your scheme sort of relies on that porch or that plaza to much kind of greater degree than others. And then secondly, I would say, Maria started to pick up on the sort of sectional variation occurring at the ceiling plane, which I think is fantastic, and it reinforces the sort of argument that you're making in plan. Once we get to that kind of back of house space, the space kind of contracts. I would say, and you don't have this skill set yet, but one drawing that will make that more evident, because the axon isn't helping you, but the worm's eye, which is the axon from below, would be the drawing that would really start to show all of those moves that you're doing at the ceiling. So again, you don't have that skill or that drawing type yet, but I'm thinking down the road, and that would be a very kind of productive drawing, so that the three-dimensional axonometric view is revealing rather than hiding one of your kind of key design elements.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with these comments, and you can also, if it's modeled already, and you could have drawn the section on its own, but if you modeled that ceiling space, like some drawings that my design partner and I like to do, it's like as if you have like a hat that you're kind of opening up, and you get to kind of see, what that ceiling is like, and then you could see how then it could be closed, and eventually, like we like to make like GIFs, like animations of those, because we've played a lot with the ceiling in a few of our projects. And when I saw this, I too was kind of taken by the concept diagram and the snail, and it reminded me of that library project that's on a spiral. I think it's Fujimoto. I'm not sure if you know of it, but if you don't, look it up, because it's a library, so there's lots of shelving as well. And so I don't know if you all were given like a kit of parts. At one point, Carrie had said exterior wall was 12 inches, interior walls are 6 inches, and then there's these, glass that looks like, I don't know if it's on a 4 foot or 6 foot grid or something. But with your concept, like really think about those elements and how you might need to like morph them or shift them or change them, and this idea of poche, of what's like filled in. It could be that like poche is the space between two of your glass 6 foot on center walls, So I think that like just conceptually trying to figure out how to really reify and use the idea of this snail and this concept more to the benefit of architecture, because it's tough to read it. It's definitely tough to read it in the plan. And I see how a ceiling scape could help you with it. But I think that especially with this idea of interior versus exterior and your desire to like open the whole thing up, like I wonder if it is through the layering of these materials that you can actually like create that thickness, or if some things actually are the thickness of shelves. I'm curious, can we see the initial diagrams for this project when they were looking just at the shelving? Yeah, so lots of exploration. Seems like they're very different, or at least there's 3 very different approaches. But you can see how what you're doing with like the third one, that one, you know, with an idea of poche, right? So you could have like thickened space that is still occupiable. And so we might be able to see the diagram better.
And it's always hard to end these reviews or even transition, because Sabrina, I know that you wrestled with many of these ideas, and your project is fraught with potential that time doesn't permit you to study, time and experience even. But even just little details like this, of the exhibit shelving becoming benches, becoming a little room, becoming a little node, or your earlier investigations of frosted glass and Jean Nouvel and these sliding partitions. There's a lot in this project that's just really exciting, and it's also just a great moment to consider that you can still continue this project, you can still put this in your portfolio, and these ideas can continue into future projects. But also for final reviews to just be mindful in the future of just how difficult it is to just show this really, you have an incredible richness of ideas, and then you can only get out so much. I would just add too that I like the idea of maybe a cinnamon roll instead of a snail, not just because it's more delicious and whatnot, but also because it starts to, we know that there's like layers of cinnamon in between, and that starts to suggest, I think, what Brand, maybe others are talking about in terms of poche and kind of thickening and treating, you know, like the layer of hallway perimeter around here becomes, you know, that gap between the bands of the dough, and you know, that's where this kind of like sweetness occurs or something like that. I'm not sure how far I can take that, but thank you very much, Sabrina. It's really great to see this project. I appreciated your presentation as well. Aaron, please take it away.
Hi, my name is Aaron Lesser, and one of the most important parts of the Two-Lane Depot is creating separation between public and private areas. My project creates this separation by pushing all of the public areas towards the entry plaza and all of the private spaces towards the Mississippi River. There's more back of house space than front of house space in order to accommodate for the offices and receiving, and also to allow for more space for private archive shelving. In terms of the layout of the archive shelving, which you can see best in plain view, the grid system provides easy access to all of the archive material, while the extracted zones create space for socialization and collaboration. The public archives are pretty much the opposite. Since the main goal of an archive is to preserve the artifacts within it, the general public shouldn't be spending too much time in the public archives, so there isn't any space reserved for loitering. The display and research room, on the other hand, do have areas to linger in, both to take people out of the archive shelving and to encourage socialization and to create a workspace.
I'm sorry, can you reiterate one more time your primary organizational strategy? I see that you have like a public and private, but you also seem to have gradients of that within each of them.
Yeah, so if you could just go to plan view. Thank you. So I want everything pushed, or all the public spaces pushed towards the entry plaza, just to make circulation easier and more simple. But within the areas, there are, I think it's like, it's easiest to see it in the research room. There are private areas and there are public areas. So you have those little rooms in the back where you can do work. They're quiet, they're easy, but you also have spaces to collaborate, like the little tables. In the private archiving, you have a grid of shelves that has little areas extracted with, I don't know what you would call them, with areas to socialize in them and places to sit, places to collaborate. You have little pedestals in them. So it's an experience that encourages collaboration while also is just comfortable and easy to maneuver in and easy to navigate.
So is the space on the left with all the tables and shelves, that's not open to the public?
No.
Aaron, I find the project to be organized and for the most part, well documented and well drawn, but I think it has some fundamental flaws to be quite frank. I'm not sure the concept diagram is doing you any favors. There's really not much of a concept other than really a kind of exposition of the organization of the project, which also your plan doesn't really kind of substantiate the claims made in the concept diagram. So I don't know how much it's what it's doing for you. Just to maybe point out some of the areas that I find problematic. One, you're placing, for instance, public restrooms right on the kind of main facade of the project. And that's definitely something that you want to avoid. That is the sort of public, it's literally the public face, the public interface of this whole depot. And so to place something so opaque, it seems a great missed opportunity. The thresholds between the kind of public and private spaces seem really underdeveloped. For instance, you enter, and as Maria kind of already asked, I think it was Maria, you can't turn right. That's not public space, yet it seems it's in the public zone. So you turn left and you're in this sort of lobby space, I understand. But then beyond that, the organization for me seems to really kind of break down. The kind of main middle space, is that public? Is that private? There's the organization that I see in plan just leaves a lot of questions. How the space is circulated, how the kind of hierarchies are made clear for the different user types. What's the path of getting to an office if I'm a researcher, for instance?
The front door, and then there's a door behind the front desk.
But isn't
the
that
fastest way to the research room?
Isn't that the
sorry, what?
for the public?
Yeah, that is the public area.
So you also said that's the research area. So That's where I think the ambiguity is beginning to arise.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm confused by the project in that, like, I think what it is, and maybe a little bit for the previous project, when Adam was pointing out like the scalar, like that there could have been like a lot of investigation into the way that the shelving works and it becomes a bench in the previous project. When I look at this, I see that what it looks like to me, it's like there's been an organization in that you had a grid and you divided the grid and then you infilled each one of those areas with like a furniture layout. And I think that you did a decent job at like the width of like a nice pathway and stuff like this. But I think what's tough right now is the larger architectural concept. I guess Carrie was kind of getting at that when we're looking at the concept diagram. You know, to me, one of the most interesting things is there's a tree in your drawing and there hasn't been a tree in any drawing because we're on a dock, you know? And so, I mean, I want to like take the tree and like bring it onto the dock, which is totally weird and bizarre, but actually, you know, maybe you could like cut up that dock and put like huge, you know, because trees need, as you can see in your, because you even have, you know, how long roots need to go down, right? Like, could there be like these massive things that hold the dirt for these trees to be on the water, right? Which is totally bizarre and weird. And then like whatever those things are, like where my mind is going, whatever those things are, they come up and they start to become like the benches and the, you know, and the storage containers, and it starts to make the project a unique architectural project, and which again would then need like that layer of rational thinking where you go and you make sure that, you know, the furniture layout makes sense and works. But what I'm seeing in this project is that and you had 3 projects over the semester, so I know it's really tough, but I don't think you really got to that place where you got very excited about a concept that would kind of drive the architecture. And I think that that's a tough place to be, because it's obvious that you can draw, you know what I mean? Like it's clear and it's clean, but it's hard, I think, as a critic anyway, to like be able to bite into stuff and to really talk about it, if that's fair to say. But I like too the drawing on the bottom right, like seeing just a linear line drawing that's in perspective. That can be really tough to do well. The one on the left, obviously there's some line weight issues, so it's very difficult to read. But the one on the right, I mean, I like seeing the like density of the lines and the stacking and how that would, you know, create depth as an experience. So.
I agree. I think that this project just needs a little bit more of a strategy. I think that all of these projects, that's kind of the big elephant in the room that you're dealing with. What is your big strategy? And so that's why that was my first question. And when you look at your plan, you know, you have a language of layouts. That's really what you're working with. But the layouts themselves are, between the public and private, relatively similar. So as a user in this space, I think I would be a little bit confused. And I think that the intention of this project was to sort of develop an architectural language that really communicated with the public person, you know, what part was for them to experience, what part, whether it's physically to get close to the objects, what part was for them to see. So put yourself in the shoes of somebody in these spaces more, and continue to keep working on these beautiful drawings, and you're gonna do fine. It's all about strategy and big ideas, and you'll get there.
And looking at the original diagram that you had, the sort of purple and green division, that line that divides them seems like it would be very important. So maybe like those like bathrooms, offices, private program becomes like part of that line. Like you did thicken a wall to sort of encompass those columns in there. So I think like there are moves that you could have done that would have brought the public gallery and all those other spaces more to the forefront, and use the sort of back of house in the public space, like the toilets and the offices and all that stuff, to sort of divide those spaces more. And that research space does seem like a very interesting area to be in, like with those tables and chairs and everything. And its entrance is very, it's just like one door, you know, like I think like there could have been more of a procession or differentiation of sequence for the public and the private spaces.
Aaron, we're out of time. I know that not everything in this project is where you lived up to your ambitions for the project. I know there were lots of moves and moments that were very promising in here, but I just remind that it's really exciting looking at your trajectory. I know you were a spring scholar and hadn't drawn a plan before starting this semester, and just that trajectory. It's really impressive that now you're having a serious critique at the level of proper architecture and not just line weights and you know, minor-ish, you know, very basic technical issues. We do need to move on. We are losing a critic. Terry Norman is leaving, but we are gaining Iñaki Alday, the Dean of the Tulane School of Architecture. Iñaki, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And our very quick introductions. Katie McBride so I know Katie from way back at University of Pennsylvania when I was a consultant to the studios there, and now at Office OJT, formerly at Trahan Architects. Maria Espinoza, I believe you know, now a student at the GSD, and Brant Knapp of Haverford Architects, and sorry, it's Haverford. Who I know from also just about Columbia University, I guess, or NJIT, some of these schools as well. And we were all actually on the same review of Katie way back. Please, I know you know the project a little bit. Please just jump in with questions at any time.
And I'm gonna peel off, but I just want to quickly add that it's been a real pleasure. Congratulations, everyone. I wish I could stay, and I really look forward to working with all of you next year and in digital media and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carrie. So, Iñaki, these drawings are part of early studies that may or may not have any direct relationship to the project. We have concept, starting with the concept diagram, the 6 boards are the main focus of the project. Peyton, please take it away.
Hello, my name is Peyton Marshall. In the most basic sense, this assignment is divided into front of house and back of house, or in other words, public and private spaces. The majority of this U-shaped scheme is private, and the outer zones, or as the outer zones would not fall into the public category. The center is the public lobby, and most museums have a strict no touching rule, but the artifacts in this lobby are either durable or a replicant of the object. There are elevated surfaces throughout the lobby for children to climb on and to further interact with the artifacts on them. As this is a place to house artifacts, the shelves are very important. The northern zone of shelving in the plan, if you could go there.
Yeah, sorry.
You're good. The northern zone of shelving is for highly sensitive and precious artifacts and for specific research. And the southern zone of shelving is for mildly precious artifacts and general research. Both the northern and southern zones leak into the all-access lobby so the general public can see the objects and watch the researchers. And the western side of the plan is designated to back-of-house programs with offices which have a lot of privacy and disconnect from the lobby. They also have great river views. The U-shaped scheme generally prohibits blurred zoning, but through the use of glass and furniture, the northern, middle, and southern zones almost become one region, practically meeting in the central concierge desk. And then if you could go down to the perspectives. I just want to say that this is a view of you're standing in the lobby, but looking into like the researchers' shelving zones. And then the other one is a view of outside of the lobby where you can see the other perspective, if you can go there. Is a view from outside of the lobby where you can see where the lobby is and then where the public or private shelves begin. And they kind of flank into the concierge desk in the center.
I'm very intrigued by this strategy, mostly because of how well you've rendered them in perspective here. It's very voyeur-esque, which I think is a nice way to, like, you know, you're trying to control the space, you're trying to keep things separate, but you're also trying to make it feel interactive. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're showing glass between the two, right? The shelves penetrate the glass, but you can't actually walk past the perimeter of this central zone, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of hard to show, but yeah, it's just the lobby is like almost a glass insertion into the shelving, and that's emphasized too by the differing roof heights.
Yeah, I think that it creates like a totally different type of experience, interactive experience than the other projects we've seen, where it's more, it's just more like on a micro scale. And so the plaza becomes really important as a public space. And this is kind of more of like a brief, you cool off in here, just kind of take a look around. I don't see a lot of program happening in there, would be the only downside. It's really just more of a little rest area, I would say. But as you said, there are durable objects in the central area. So that is interesting as well. It's kind of like a big playground for kids inside of a museum. So I find that very interesting as a strategy. I think that you're playing with some interesting ideas. I do think that, you've created this kind of division between the core and the storage, but then it seems like the area that's the true back of house is a little bit forgotten. So I would invite you to kind of think about that privacy gradient a little bit more and kind of incorporate that into the plan in a little bit more of a holistic way.
I love the way that you divided these objects, and we're thinking of them in terms of like how people interact with them, like whether they're high value and more rare, so they need to kind of be kept more separated, or like able to be touched and are more durable. And I think like that is kind of inherently very like separating and not really connecting the person to the object. But then you have like these really interesting moments where either like these tables or chairs sort of penetrate that barrier and begin to like kind of show you a different language going on there, which I think was like an interesting way of like resolving that separation.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by this project as well. And the two things that I think are really, really strong, well, I should say three things. One, the clarity of the diagram, the U shape, and your narrative of how you explain that, it's just very clear. And so I really appreciate that. And then two would be all of the kind of idiosyncratic details that you have, added, not only in perspective, but also in plan, and the amount of drawing. You can see that, you had fun with the project, that you got into it, that you maybe became obsessive, that you probably dreamed about this project, because, you're really looking at the nitty gritty. And I couldn't even read, because again, this is where I love that Zoom allows me to be in New Orleans right now, but it is nice to actually physically be able to, stand up and look closely at a drawing. What does it say on the bottom of that door where your mouse is right now? like do not depot hours. I thought it said do not. I'm like, what are we not allowed to do? Okay, depot hours. I mean, that's the kind of like level of okay, you know, you imagine that people are coming at 6 o'clock and they're looking at and thinking, oh my God, I need to get in there tomorrow. What time do they open? So I really appreciate, you know, those three things. And then I think that there just is refinement of all of those. Oh wait, the third one I didn't say. I said 1 and 2. The third one is, and Carrie had mentioned this a couple of times, the plaza. And, you know, it was said on the last reviewer said, hey, you know, this is just an extension of that plaza. And you actually put some things like it looks like these pedestals that have what looks like sculpture, but I'm sure they're artifacts that can be outdoors and weathered. And you have some seating there. I just think that with all of that, it's about refinement. So, you know, someone had mentioned that the back of house could be cleaned up a little. I think it's a little just like weird at the northern part of the back of house, how like, you know, that line isn't continued to emphasize that. It just looks like it kind of like falls apart a little bit to its concept. But I think it's because instead of like making sure that was really clear and, you know, iterated upon, you were drawing little tiny things and like really thinking about the idiosyncratic nature. So it's a beautiful project. I think, you know, again, that plaza, they're a little placeholder seating, but, you know, play around with it. Maybe it's about it transforming. I mean, the fact that you're putting those little tables reminds me of Paley Park and how none of the furniture is stuck anywhere and that you can move it. So it would be great if that is the concept to see this thing, you know, in a few different configurations with the tables and such, but wonderful work.
Python, this is really beautiful. I was trying to look at my expressions are poor, so I'm gonna try to make some notes if that makes sense. Because in the plan, can you explain me a little bit how you imagine the relation between the building and the city, whatever is in solid ground?
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
If you can explain me a little bit about the relation between how you imagine the building to be perceived from the ground, not from the pier, but beyond the pier.
Yeah, so I think that from afar, you definitely see the extension of the roof kind of first, because it just pops out of like the middle of this building. But it's kind of an all glass mostly glass building. And honestly, it's not so much about standing and looking at it from the ground. It's more about being on the pier or being within the building and seeing through the building or seeing out of the building. Because the like view you'd get from the park is kind of this loading dock, like wall truck view, which isn't very exciting. But once you get on the pier, you would see a lot more.
And why you want that? Why don't you want to be exciting as well from the park?
Let me interject a little here that we gave them a site that this is prescribed to them, that this must be the loading dock. And there's a rail line that runs very closely here, a walkway, and then the park opens up to the Rainbow Bridge over here. So this rectangle, let me sketch it, was required that every student use that rectangle for loading, and that the plaza, every student was also required that this rectangle was the only buildable area, and that the plaza was here uninterrupted. And there's kind of we have purposely, the site's a little complicated in terms of access, and again, a railway running through here. So we've kind of waved the hand a little bit just to say that this plaza would be very open to the park and there would be a kind of line of trees here or something like that.
Okay. No, because I think the project is really clear as it was mentioned, the structure. I think that this in and out from the lobby to the shelves inside, the clarity of the offices, meeting rooms, etc., and that bar of service office, let's say open office. I think it's really spectacularly clear. My question is if this is so exciting, this proposal, that it would claim to discuss with you, Adam, about rethinking some issues of the site strategy. Let's say, I say that it's so clearly and powerful that one could be rethinking what is the role of this space in between, if it has the possibility of becoming something else, as a normal process of critique sometimes of what are the questions that the project poses. But I think it's really great and clear, and congratulations for the spatial clarity. Perhaps one thing that I would like to see integrated a little bit different is the structure. I think after this iteration, thinking about how this structure could be a more integral part of the design, and maybe you don't need, maybe the columns that are in the center of the space, I don't know if you really like them or not, if they are really what you want, but maybe rethinking the structure to make sure that the structure is going in favor of the project, of what you are proposing, as opposed to solving the problems. I mean, I have no idea, but one can imagine something like having the structure, I don't know if you see some blue points, placed more in the sides, and then avoiding having a structure in the facades if you don't want that, or vice versa. How is
you seem to have a nose for everything that I required. The structure was, it's a really good point. I should mention we're also out of time on this project, but those 9 columns were required because they are existing structure. We were a little loose, but they're existing structure on the site that hold up the pier, and that's where the foundations go down below the pier. Though the students, it was a core part, the students navigate that existing structure as part of the project.
Okay, so sorry, sorry again, but yeah, but maybe it's again a questioning of how this project can adjust a little bit better to the structure. Again, it's a wonderful spatial organization. And I really appreciate the centerpiece that is behind the plane of the 2 other sides facades, so it creates a spatial entry, very clear. Excellent.
And Peyton, fantastic work. Another spring scholar who had never made an architectural drawing before this semester, and watching that development has just been a joy to see, Peyton. I really appreciate your dedication throughout. Moving on, and Iñaki, all these are fair questions, by the way, and I'll jump in if it's something I required, but you know, it's good to have these conversations as well. Sigurd, please take it away.
I believe we're supposed to have a break now.
Oh, that's right. We have a 10-minute break. Iñaki, you joined. We end up having we have a 10-minute break, so we'll come back on at 11:36. I'm going to set a 10-minute timer. And Iñaki, if you'd like, I can offer you a quick walkthrough of where the site is. I don't know what you've seen at this project before.
Yeah, no, I have the brief. I have the brief in front of me.
Okay.
Thank you.
So please rejoin at in 10 minutes when the timer hits 0. We'll start back up prompt. Leah, thanks for the reminder. And Iñaki, are there any questions that or points of discussion about the brief?
No. I was seeing the loading dock area.
Yeah.
I was not sure that was a kind of a full useful or used loading dock. But you are asking them to keep the entire surface of that loading dock.
No, it's a really it's insightful that that's the first thing you picked up on, and it's a good question, one we've debated a lot internally, because we almost in last semester there was no site for this project. It was completely siteless, with the intent that it becomes more internally focused. And so the loading dock was actually a strategic move to kind of literally wall it off from the city. And when you look at the site, there's no buildings, there's no view. I don't know what it is, 40 meters away from a wall that behind it is the railway. So that we wanted different sides, like a kind of back of house side, front of house side, but not have projects that were, there's no site plan required.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good. I think it's an excellent brief. I think that of planting a dock and having this kind of interesting, but at the same time very clear surrounding, so the students can react to that without the complications of an urban site. I think it's a very good move. And this project was beautiful, spectacular.
Yeah, I don't know who's hearing. I don't want to say too much, but we're broadcast live on YouTube right now. But yeah, I think this is it's so exciting. When these
super well drawn, and very good in terms of spatial thinking.
Yeah.
But I think that's what the students need to become in the first year. No, after the first year, spatial thinkers. So it really looks great.
And I know that you've been on the previous reviews, but this is the third project and the first time they have a building. The previous projects were not building related. So yeah, it's great when it comes together. We also motivating us as well, the first year instructors, is that next year, or the third semester is heavily focused on section and site. So this project is intentionally focused more on plan and less on site.
Yeah, great.
We tried to do a field trip to the site and to I don't know if you're aware, but the Fish Depot is a real place.
Yeah.
Or it's not called the Fish Depot, but some of the students actually went there. And I was telling the others earlier it's so off the grid that the Uber drivers wouldn't go the last half mile. There's like a dirt road that goes to it. And the Uber drivers, the sign says no trespassing, the Uber drivers refused. So the students, some of them arrived late and had to walk a half mile just to get there.
Fantastic. Adam, take a quick break.
Okay. All right. I'll see you in 6 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we're at 11:37. Let's start back up again. Sigurd, can you please take it away?
Yes. So, hi, my name is Sigurd Peterson, and for this project, the focus was connecting the public and private areas through a dowel. So if you'll look at the concept idea, you can see the dowel right there, and I was inspired by the cross section. And then, so the way that I did this was, if you want to zoom in to the plan, I divided into public and private areas. So in the front through the entry plaza, you enter and there is a public area with shelving towards the lower half and more exhibits towards the upper half. And this is the second half, and the farther back is the back of house. And the top of that is more programmatic focused, and it works with the offices and the other buildings, creating a workspace for the workers in the back of house. While the second half of that is shelving, and this is for the storage area in the back of house and allowing the researchers to have access to a large amount of objects. So the main focus of this project is the dowel part, which is my research room. And with my research room, I've lined up the windows, which connect the public into the back of house. So when they walk in through the front of house, they have full access to this front of house space with shelving and pedestals. And then with the help of a worker, they can then walk into the research room where they can't leave the research room, but they do have views outside into the back of house. And also, if you'll zoom in towards that top part of the plan, there are cubbies for workers to bring artifacts to the public. And the point of this research room is to connect the public with the private so that the public gets a better idea of the great artifacts that we're storing in the two-lane depot.
So just very quickly, Sarah, do you want to walk us, just explain where the other drawings are located and what they're showing?
All right, so you can see my first, I have the section cuts labeled. So this first section goes through my reading room, and it allows you to see basically how this connects the first half on the left to the private on the right, and it's cut through by that reading room. And then the secondary section shows the view from the right side of the building, and you can see inside how people would gather around the pedestals, and then there's a picture of people transitioning artifacts through the cubbies as well as the workspaces and offices. And then in my perspectives, the first one is placed right behind the entrance to the lobby. It's the guy standing in my plan directly behind the front desk, and he's looking southward towards the Mississippi River, and you can see the shelving as it delineates into more pedestals, and you can see how that is broken up by the research room. The second perspective is inside the research room, and you can see how the research room is kind of an area of activity where there's a lot of learning going on, and you can see the connections to the outside back of house as well.
All right. Well, great to see this project. And again, like some of the line work and just seeing drawings to this level, especially when you had 3 projects over the semester, I really appreciate it. And, you know, this kind of tectonic idea of some kind of a device that connects 2 pieces together, the dowel, I think is really cool as a concept to try to bring 2 volumes together, and whether that's a pin or a dowel, it's really cool. So I'm trying to wrap my head around the clarity and of that move, and if it would be visible experientially. I think for me, the place I see it the most is in the plan, and it's very, very similar to the cross section that you have in your concept sketch. And, you know, the idea of it, the bigger idea of why you're even, I think, attracted to this concept is to kind of allow the research to be visible, you know, but it's still to be accessible. And therefore, I think the conference rooms are, it's curious to me why it would be, you know, the desks in the conference rooms. I guess those desks, and there are actual objects on the desk themselves. But that to me, I think is like really exciting. And maybe those two linear bars, now that I'm seeing it, maybe those are full of shelves. Because if I was part of the public and just going into this space, and I would want some architectural elements to allow me to see that there's a space that's been punctured. And it could be like, you could imagine that this could actually have a sectional moment, not just that it pops off of the ceiling, but it could feel like a whole volume the researchers might need to like take a step up into. So it appears like there's something that's almost like cantilevering through that glass wall, right? And connecting, or I guess it's not glass wall, that thin wall, and penetrating both of the spaces. But then I would want to see like the action of the research, you know, and I don't know whether, you know, they have like lab materials that they clean the things with, or, you know, how they really like work in the space. But I would be way more interested to like get a glimpse into that than, let's say, like a conference meeting happening. So that's something to think about, that you're giving them the glimpse, but I think that the objects themselves would be, you know, how they're cleaned, how they're documented, you know, like the more workspace would be exciting to see. And then I would say, you know, I do appreciate that move of the punch through the roof. And I don't know how I'm seeing that your light, your clear story window is, I think that's towards the south. And so, you know, thinking about if these objects are needing to be safe, I mean, that's one reason why it would be great that they, you know, are in the center of this space, you know, that direct light won't fit them. I would say flipping that might be the right idea, to allow the north light in, but it's not direct sun that could possibly penetrate those. And I think, well, I think that space could be like larger and bigger. And I think that you had the concept from that sketch, and it's like this thin dowel or this thin pin that usually connects it. But I think, you know, in terms of being able to look and see action, you know, you can allow the liberty to make it bigger and grander. And, you know, I just really appreciate all of the little details of the drawing, and all of the people that are rendered. Seems like the person on the bottom right there with the door might be a little tall for that door. But yeah, you really get a sense of like being, you know, inside the space, and there being, you know, small nooks and open areas. But so yeah, that's in the pin. I mean, that too, it's like, you know, trying to create that it looks like its own volume. You could do that with materials. But I would say, you know, it could be that it's like a glass box inside of this thing. I mean, I guess I would want to understand, like, you know, why have any walls? A beautiful project.
Yeah, I think that the concept and the strategy is very strong. It is a little, the dowel space is a little small and tight. I do like that you're trying to create this level of interaction with working with the objects. Like, you're basically creating the space to like let the public feel like they're one of the people that work there and can understand the objects in depth. And I think that's really great. But I think that the little booths, even though very functional, are a little kind of remind me of when you you see the movies in jail and somebody's coming up to the phone and they're like, "Hey, can I see this object, please?" So it's a little compressed and a little, I don't know if I would enjoy being in that space. But I think that what you're playing with is this concept of like, hey, come into our facility and be one of us. So what that makes me think of is, you don't need this kind of even more in-depth office space in the back. Like, what if your DAO is the sort of the space where people get to really coexist with the people that are working there? So maybe that's just another layer of like lamination of the DAO, like within the DAO. But I think that the strategy is strong. I think that it's lost in the let me figure out how to mark up on these things. Here we go. I think over here, it's just kind of like, the strategy is lost. It's just very practical. So I think we're in an era where we are really comfortable mixing uses, and especially when it comes to workspaces. So I would interrogate that program and that need for separation a little bit more, specifically with this project, because of how you're approaching the DAO as like this interface. It's just a little too removed for me. So I don't think I would feel particularly inclined to use that space as much as you might think. But I think the drawings are really great. I think the strategy is really strong, it's simple, but it's good. And yeah, really nice work.
I agree that the dowel piece could be a bit larger, but what I do like that you did in that space is that you're not just sort of having like a visual connection to the archive, but also like a tactile one with those booths, and the fact that it's open on that side and you can there's like two different conditions that you're having just within that one little space. So I think that's an interesting approach. I think all the other ones that we've seen have been more purely visual. So I do appreciate that this is sort of bringing the public into that research aspect a bit more.
Yeah. Adam, can we zoom in the plan a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering, so I think it's the spatial articulation is very clear, and my question is how much how that spatial articulation can be perceived by the people who are visiting this, because I'm not sure that what we can see in the plan will be easy to be perceived by a visitor or even a user that would be involved through walls that are a little bit indistinct. So I wonder if there's a possibility of being more clear in defining the walls and the materiality and the thickness of the two volumes that you have, that are the two volumes that are organizing the space. And then if the other partitions are partitions that are more transparent, lighter, even if they are more service partitions in a way, or retreated somehow. So the volumes are more clear, and then you can even add a second layer of organization, kind of carpets that are coming in and out and are helping you to organize maybe things related to these volumes in a more clear way. So I like really very much the clarity of the organization of the program, and I just wonder if you can be more strategic in showing that organization, and that organization helping you to make decisions in how you make the other partitions and the programs. But I think it's very interesting, and of course in the section be as clear as it seems to be in the plan, no? That maybe it has a much more it has a more clear sectional anchor of this piece here, and the other piece I don't know if has another sectional condition as well or not, but all these pieces playing together, and then even you can imagine different scenarios of placing in different ways the rest of the program that happens in between those two volumes. But yeah, very clear in that sense.
Thank you.
Sigurd, these are fantastic comments. I know they probably, a lot of these resonated with you because I know you've struggled with many of these issues. We're well over time, but Sigurd, I'm just really impressed. You know, it wasn't very long ago we're having discussions about what's a cut line and what's not, and just even just at the squint level of clarity of your plan is just fantastic to see. I hope these comments gave you fodder on how you might expand these sorts of spaces in future projects, but really well done, Sigurd.
Thank you.
We have 3 more, and Antonia, please kick us off.
Hi, I'm Antonia. So kind of the task in this project, right, is to create a building that balances the public and the private spaces, or the archives and the offices, and then the exhibit and the public space. And so to solve this problem, the building is divided up into 4 distinct quadrants, and they each range from most public to most private. And then, yeah, and you can see that in the plan. And then each one is kind of cut in half, which is the hatching, and you can see that kind of pinwheel shape. So the most public quadrant in the section, you can see it's got a higher roof, just to mark it as special, and it has this really dramatic display wall for the exhibit, which you can see in the perspective, the first perspective, and it's kind of a space that's meant to draw people in, before they walk towards the back of the building. And then because of the quadrant separation, the archives themselves are actually subdivided into 3 distinct areas. You can see that in the plan. And it provides an opportunity to categorize different collections and offer some form of order to the archives. But then right in the middle of that, we can see that in the second perspective, there's where the 3 sections come together to form this small meeting space that kind of breaks those quadrant distinctions.
So yeah, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the way that you worked with the pinwheel as a organizational strategy, and that where you needed to kind of let go at times, you did, because it's very visible to see the pinwheel. But for instance, the way it's divided in half on the quadrant 2, if you will, it broke down a little bit, and that's great. I mean, sometimes you need to have the flexibility. The organization is there, and then what you've been able to do now is really get into this idea of space making and defining those different zones. And I think that you've done a really good job with drawing the furniture layouts and the plans in spatially. The one area that you mentioned at the end is kind of like the crux, like the center of the pinwheel where people can gather. That seems a little tight. Like I feel like it probably, you could maybe lose a few of the bookshelves to the north to really allow that center area to maybe be a little more loose and have some more space. And then I would say that there was a project where we were talking about what is the driving force, and how has that been implemented. And we talked a lot about how it really was about the layout. Like this person had gotten really into the layout in these particular divisions, but their overall concept was a struggle, and so it was lacking. I feel like this pinwheel concept is actually really great, and I feel like you've been able to work with it and use it in many ways. But I guess I'm wondering, what about maybe there needs to be an overlay to allow the pinwheel parts to really see through to one another. So for example, I love this space that in Axon you can see is like, it's the pink, it's the one that has the amazing wall that's been thickened. I wonder, like, can you get a like glimpse of that from the lobby area, you know, rather than these being like discrete, you know, volumes that have these great layouts, and it works in its Pinwheel overall organization. But I wonder about the connection through to these spaces. And then likewise, like if you had more time on this project, I would love to see how that thickened wall also like creates, you know, a bench, you know what I mean, on the other side of it or something. And then, you know, maybe the stacks, maybe it makes sense that they're uniform, or maybe they start to give, and it's the one moment where, you know, the stacks take on a different, you know, size dimension because there's a bench there and maybe another bench on the other side, so on and so forth. So I think that like where you've delineated, you've used the pinwheel to your advantage. I now think that, and you started with the looseness because quadrant 2 isn't perfect. Now, what about blowing it open and blowing it through for specific moments? But it's really beautiful and great work.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree. I think that what this approach is doing that the others are doing differently is that this one is, you know, there's not a single focus per se. It's staggered and rotating. So the space feels a lot more activated, which makes me want to like Brant said, see more through the space. Like this version is all about hyperactivity. And so we can, you know, kind of see more of what's going on, perhaps access more of what's going on. And so I think when you start to play with the pinwheel and that concept of everything mixing, you have new access points where you start to play with connections through spaces. So I think it's a very sophisticated strategy that you can continue to build on. I think your drawings are really beautiful. I love the pink, and this drawing, I'm sorry, you guys can't see my screen, but let's look at that perspective on the bottom left. I think that you're starting to respond to the objects in a way that I think is architecturally interesting. But I think that can happen on the scale of the entire building, not just one special little wall in the space. So really great work, really smart strategy. And I love the diagram of the pinwheel, very straightforward. And keep it up, it's nice, thanks.
I really like the movement in the plan as well with the outdoor plaza, like the way that you sort of engage that lower right quadrant. Especially like thinking about the pinwheel, it makes it seem as if like the wind just like moves through and just spray out onto the outdoor plaza. And I am really interested in this thickened wall sort of like destination space. And going back to the pinwheel idea, I think that central column, that's sort of like the axis that the pinwheel rotates on, feels like it could have taken, oh, sorry, there's my dogs. I feels like that axis sort of could have taken like a bigger focus, like if that either became a room in the center that everything rotated around, but just thinking about like the geometry of your organization and how that sort of central point becomes a bigger focus with your diagram.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I find this project extremely sophisticated. It's not obvious at all, and if we look at how the spaces are organized, and you say, okay, there's this interior, this sequence of public spaces that I'm trying to draw in the iPad, that it doesn't work, I'm sorry. So I'm going to, and let me, yeah, sorry. This sequence of these public open spaces that are organized like this, I find that it's very sophisticated along this facade. And my question is how I would diagram this piece here. If it is just continuous of this, or if this is a different way of doing that. What's the public character when you do kind of idea diagrams that are checking what your proposal is about. But I find really sophisticated this with the extension of this piece outside. And I would just suggest that it would be really interesting while as you are maturing as an architect, the same relation that you, or the same idea of materiality that you have in this thick wall, that is a kind of mass that you are excavating somehow, that you start to think materially in the same way in how you are doing the other walls and how you are absorbing or not the structure inside it, and maybe even further clarifying a little bit more these volumes and this if this is something that should be open to continue, because your spaces are all sliding and moving and crossing, and they are never blocked. And I find this really, you are always having a spatial exit to any place that you are having. No? So just keeping that logic till the end. But again, thinking in the materiality with the same sophistication that you are thinking of the thick wall, to think in the other walls and the relation between the walls and the columns. And I know this is asking too much, but it's for the next in this very sophisticated thinking that you are. And the only small thing that I would say is look at when you do the perspective and you look at maybe the axon diagram, the axonometric view that you have. When you look at it, it's good to see and think about what are the pieces that you like it and the pieces that you don't like that much. No, for instance, do you like these small doors there, or you rather cut this volume and have the doors inside? Same for other small doors that are popping here and there. So how you transform, how you change the doors by from a door to an absence of the wall, or a cut in the volume, or an excavation, when you don't want to trust in the doorknob to explain where you are going. But again, these are comments that are way further in your career, and they are coming up because of the sophistication of this project that I find fascinating.
Antonia, this is as Iñaki and our other critics so well explained. This is one of those projects that I want to see it developed. I want to, it makes me really, this feels like a tease for something, it's a trailer for a movie that I want to buy tickets in advance, on opening day. It's really exciting. And just knowing, again, how your struggle with this project, the technology and so forth, and how often you seem to express concern about having a concept. I think it's a great moment to see just how strong your concept is, and that a concept isn't always something that is, even though in the end it became simple like a pinwheel. That was the pinwheel as a diagram only came at the last minute, right? But it was always present, and there are other versions of it. And even the comment about the center of the pinwheel, where the thickened wall goes, it's just full of promise. And I just want to say congratulations on that. It's really, really sophisticated. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have two more. Sophia Vladimir, please introduce your project.
Hi, my name is Sophia Vladimir. This project is structured around the idea of a mix of programs embedded within a thickened band. The public space, so the museum and the gallery space is in the center, with the private back of house wrapping around it. If you look at my first perspective, you can see I'll give you a little moment to go there. If you look at my first perspective, you can see the main gallery space with the platform in the middle that supports artifacts, and there are pockets carved out of the band on the walls around it. There are also thinner, taller platforms and wider ones that spill out larger artifacts from within the walls. So that leaves room for a variety of sizes and types of objects. In the second perspective, you can see the front desk and how someone would enter the main gallery space. Most importantly, though, this perspective also shows the distinct layers of the depot. Those layers are the outer perimeter, the thick band that's been filled in using red tones, and in which the desk is situated in, and the central gallery, and then the pockets for the objects, which are pink.
Okay, I just want to say a comment or two just about the plan.
Yeah. So the black band is pretty clear, but then I divided the white spaces within it are the more public spaces, or the spots or the areas that you can wander more easily through, or that are open to wander through, and then the things that are fully shaded in black, excuse me, are the very private areas like offices, bathrooms. At the top in the center, that's the special shelving, because in the fish archive tour, they had a specific room that was for very valuable objects. And yeah.
I think this is an exciting use of poche as occupiable space that I'm always really interested in. It's you're using that thickness to kind of really communicate what is private and what is public. I think that's different than things we've seen before. I think that you're playing with shapes inside that poche. The bullioning out for objects is really nice and fun, and I think that people would really enjoy going into that inner space and finding all the little pockets. I do think that you have the outer ring in your floor plan that is kind of more for stacks, and I think that you could possibly find a better way to kind of have a transition from the inner core to the outer, because it does feel a little bit isolated on the outside. You could basically use more of the carvings, not just to hold objects, but as like transition spaces to that outer core, like you're doing around the lobby desk, but not as much in other locations. But yeah, I'm excited to see you thinking about the thickness and the weight of the spaces inside of a shell. I think that is a very formal approach, but it's also being used very strategically in an organization of public and private space. So beautiful drawings, great job.
I like how this thicker band that you have sort of going around this whole space really invites the viewer to explore. There's so many like little nooks and crannies that you've designed to be sort of highly specific experiences. So I think it's really interesting to see how those connect to the objects and the types of objects that you put in there, as well as just like figuring out like a very almost orthogonal layout for the infilled space, not just the carve out space, to sort of interact together. Yeah, I think like the sectional moves that you have are very interesting.
I mean, I'm impressed too with you know, when you use the poche the way that you've used it, it's just really clear to see, you know, the diagram and your concept. And I also just thinking about that outer bound, that's probably the area I would say that would hopefully be developed more if you had more time. It's a very inward facing building, and I love that interior space and the fact that you're thinking of the floor as a place for display, and that perspective is just right on. But for instance, like in the plan where you could potentially have even like a carve out, something like on the I guess I'll use my, I have to go back to get my annotate up. Like for instance, this platform here that you have, I think that one was higher than just on the floor, but maybe it was another floor piece. Maybe you could walk around it, and maybe it actually could even start to take in, and I don't know whether maybe it is even, you know, a big portion, but that doesn't mean that, you know, you lose the diagram, but we still might be able to have light and like be able to have views to the water and so on and so forth. Because although I love the clarity of what you're drawing here, I think the use of the building is very inward, and while that there's a great point to that, I think it would be, you know, wonderful for the public to be able to view the water. And, you know, likewise, I think that, you know, I think you have that like loading dock that's necessary or something. I do think that all of those could be figured out with more time. And I think you, for time's sake, focused on the things that were really compelling and exciting about the project. I also love the blobs that you have in this one. They're unique and they're different, and there's ones that have like hairy hats, and I think that, you know, that's all really exciting. And you didn't talk a lot about specific objects and how that prompted this, but I can see that you were thinking about it. And I also really appreciate, like, you know, there's certain unique situations like this that just I've never really seen a table exactly in that shape, but it kind of reminds me of something at like the UN headquarters, or like, you know, like some kind of like lecture component or something. And I would say when you start to draw something really wild and wacky, do look at different typologies, because it makes me want to like take all of this space and like think about, I don't know, a presenter here, you know, like presenting these amazing artifacts that you actually get to see in person, you know. But there is this kind of like redrawing of what is typical, like a display table or a conference table or a lecture hall. Like this has like components of all three of those, and looking to known typologies and then like reinventing, because I see some reinvention there, and I think that if you add that to part of your narrative, it could be really exciting. You know, this likewise, like I'm like, are these screens that these people are kind of interacting with? I mean, it's just really you're using, you know, the constraints that you're dealt with, but maybe in interesting ways. And I would think through that and try to explain it. But nice drawings, beautiful work.
Maybe one comment, really intriguing. I would make a question about, so the diagram strategy is very clear. I see that more of a program diagram that material poche, let's say. So maybe it's something that is worth to look at, in a way, doing a kind of a series of analysis diagrams of your projects would be helpful for you to understand and to self-critique yourself in the process. If you do a diagram of what is public and what is private, of what the materials that you are using are opaque and transparent, even a diagram in this case of the wet areas, where are they located, and if each in those diagrams are looking good to you, it's like a way of testing. If you can zoom a little bit in the plan, because it's all really sophisticated. The plan has an interesting dilemma, because it's a kind of donut, and how you enter in a donut, it's a kind of bad problem, complicated problem. No, so in a way, I wonder how you chew the donut and you eat a portion of it. I'm just wondering if a strategy of cutting of it in the donut would be to think on this space in a different way, almost as a chew in that. So the diagram of the project has this poche thing and the outdoor, and there's a moment in which you can make the chew in the donut and you can enter in the cream or whatever you have in the inside, no? Because it's always difficult when you have this system of parallel things, but I think it's basically there, and the way you penetrate then through this space with the counter, I think is pretty brilliant. So how you arrive to this is my only question. Yeah, interesting. And again, maybe checking these different ways of understanding this program diagram in black, that is really effective, but now checking how true is that in terms of the opaqueness or not of the walls and what happens in those walls and how they react. That's really interesting. And I'm sorry, I have the tendency of doing a food analogy. So
I will always support the food analogy. I tried to push a cinnamon roll analogy on an earlier student. And I do think, I mean, you know, when I always take it as a good sign when reviewers start to see possibility in your project and kind of interpret other foods or diagrams or kind of readings, because it means your project, and this is a kind of showcase of that, is not operating on a single level where, you know, there's one diagram that explains it and nothing else works. So it's kind of it's a setup for many possibilities and many overlapping, intersecting possibilities. And Sophia, I just want to say, you know, at every step of the way this semester, your work has just been really sophisticated, exciting. I know how much you've struggled throughout, you know, and to arrive at this is just incredibly impressive. I love the idea of the kind of auditoriums peeking in and out, these kind of carve outs. All the possibilities for section, you know, these don't all just have to be rectangles in section. You know, we could enter into these kind of catacombs, and it would just be really exciting. This is a project where I'd love to discuss materiality, you know, and how we kind of experience these edges and whether we feel that thickness in the material or not, and where the kind of thresholds are. Absolutely, I know the perimeter is sort of neglected, as right, but that it's one or two steps away, right, from chopping up. And I just add that it's really exciting too for me to see when students get to the point where wall isn't diagram and wall are separate, where, as again the reviewers have pointed out, you could add additional walls here or additional carve-outs and make these spaces part of that space. And your diagram is, and concepts and ideas and framework are so strong, the donut is so strong, if you'll forgive me, it holds the center. So Sophia, congratulations, really amazing work.
Thank you.
We have one more project. Daphne, please take us home.
Hi, my name is Daphne, and the Tulane Depot is characterized by various programmatic functions. As mentioned previously, things like the research room, offices, private shelving, and other spaces. So instead of placing these programmatic structures in a grid-like fashion, this design places the programs in a non-hierarchical structure in which each can work together. So the concept is the inversion of a typical grid to create a kind of an idea of a village or a group of islands as shown in the concept diagram. And then, so the cluster of rooms is centered around a core garden and then gradually disperses outward into the public sphere of the design, which is the plaza all the way to the right. So each specific program is identified by a lightly hatched floor in the plan, and then tall triangular ceilings shown in both the section and the isometric. And these ceilings in these core rooms extend beyond the regular rectangular roof, and they each have a clerestory window, which further creates these like village-like buildings inside this larger space as they pop through the roof. And then for the perspectives, the first perspective on the left shows the public area of the site with views of the lobby, exhibit, and the different pedestals and seating areas out on the plaza. And then you can also see what would be the views of the water beyond the glass facade through the light blue hatching in the back. And then the second perspective is the view from the research room, and it looks out into the central garden, which is a fully glass structure resembling a sort of greenhouse, but you're still inside a closed structure.
Well, I really appreciate, you know, the way you're looking at the project. And I think we've made a comment several times to talk about volume and how to really architecturally like show that idea. And I think you're I think that there have been some approaches in previous projects that seemed a little more timid, and I really appreciate the bold, okay, these are these triangular objects, you know, here they are, and they rise up, and they're, you know, at least, you know, 8 feet taller than the rest of the building, you know, and I think that that really helps to kind of to delineate, you know, the separate volumes, and that, you know, this idea of there being this kind of village and a non-hierarchy to the spaces is really commendable, and I see it in the project. And you know, for you to do that with still holding an idea of organization and structure, I think is what allows for that. So I really appreciate that, and the bringing. There was a project earlier where I was talking about trees, right? Well, here, you know, you have this, we're on this dock, so it's kind of difficult to talk about plantings. I think a lot of people have evaded it. Here you are bringing the greenhouse in. I think those are all really, really great. And so big concepts, awesome. And then I would say, you know, looking at the plan, and thank you for being here, you know, thinking about the space between the volumes as occupiable space and not just corridors would, I think, greatly help this, because it's not that like this is not hierarchical. It's not that, you know, you have like these volumes that are only house program and then everything's just corridors in between. Actually, if you just allowed for more space between them, you know, that lower interior space would be even more exciting. And so I would wish that you would take that concept of the volumes and them being higher and really like rethought this plan. And sometimes those volumes don't need to be as big and still be just as impactful, right? Because, or maybe that it's that the space where there's tons and tons of stacks. I mean, maybe stacks don't all need to be in one area, right? Maybe stacks can be interspersed between the volumes, and maybe that helps to make zones, you know, for, you know, fish and so on and so forth. And if you had more time, because I know that that's probably the biggest thing with this project, is that, you know, there's a lot of complexity if you really got into the nitty gritty of all of these different objects. But I could imagine that really helping with like being a program device for how to separate the various stacks, you know, whether it's marine life or, you know, utensils or goodness knows. I would love to learn more about that. It could be really exciting. Yeah, but just to think about those materials. I mean, the glass makes sense, I guess, for the greenhouse, or at least for its roof. But, you know, how are those volumes delineated? You know, are they, you know, is it like, you know, when you think of the Toledo Museum, sauna, you know, has these volumes in a field, but they're made of glass. But then, you know, other times you read volumes by, you know, maybe it could be like a lapped wood, and it really feels like you're entering another house, like a village. So starting to get to material explorations too are exciting. So all of these comments are going there because the project is, you know, sophisticated, and you know, its bones are really strong, and it's drawn to a level that we can think about those next levels. But great project.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this one. I was curious if roof forms were a rule that you weren't allowed to have, because we haven't seen a lot of them. But this to me is very sophisticated as a strategy, but also just as an architectural form. I think that, you know, your approach to this program is really like about exhibition spaces and like precious moments. And so really emphasizing that with the architecture is really exciting to see. It's not just, you know, a move on the plan. It's literally in the skyline now. This, you know, you can kind of look at this building and know which which peak has which exhibit underneath it. And I think that's exciting. I mean, this is New Orleans. This is a city that needs more beautiful contemporary architecture. So I think that, like I said, form, strategy, both I find very intriguing. I do agree with Brant that sort of interstitial space between the sort of blocks could become more activated. And also I think that the progression from the plaza to those spaces could be a little bit more activated as well. But in general, beautiful drawings, excellent progress for a third of your semester. You should be very proud of yourself.
I keep focusing in on this greenhouse that you made, just because like it's not only, I know it's like not part of the research program, but it's kind of like bringing in a bit of like nature relief into these sort of stacks and stacks of objects, and kind of thinking about like how the researchers would work, like they kind of have a place to have a break. And it's just interesting to think about like bringing the outside into such a centralized form of these little villages. And especially with the way that you engage the plaza and creating these, not only like a centralized village for the researchers inside, but bringing some of that out to the public where they don't even have to go inside the depot necessarily to like engage with these objects as well.
Well, thank you for this, super exciting. I'd like to see the plan drawn with a little bit more. I think there are some issues with the lines and the openings, and probably the perimeter is still unsolved, and you would be able to solve it very easily. And I agree with the rest of the comments. If we go to the section 1 second, or the two sections 1 second, I really appreciate it seems like there's even an understanding of these sectional elements as a continuity. I appreciate that shape that you have done. It gives a kind of good understanding that what you are doing is real architecture and is not a graphic solution. And I wonder if thinking in these roofs, in this kind of diagram that I'm drawing on top of them, as a sequence of slope and flat, and the slopes that are carrying water down and flat that are carrying water horizontally, and where that water goes. I find it's a really beautiful section. And then I'm wondering about the greenhouse. And I really appreciate the idea of this courtyard, but I wonder about the greenhouse in itself. And I was remembering now, I did a visit to a jeweler in Jaipur in India that was the most sophisticated. I don't give a damn about jewels, but the most sophisticated thing. And he showed me one piece that was totally astonishing, huge, incredible. I don't know how many diamonds and rubies. But then he showed me the back of that and said, look at the back. And it was even more incredible. And this is only for the person who wears it, it's just for her. And she's the only one that sees that. And it's in touch of, in her skin. And I was totally mesmerized about that. And I think that there's a lot of architecture that are part of that. And I was remembering this when looking at this and imagining that water is coming through these roofs that you have. And what do you do with this water that is coming? And I wonder if the topographies that you have could also have like hidden topographies, no? That are only for your eyes, or the eyes of the water, not necessarily the eyes of the people. It's less spectacular. And this is a place to stay, but a place in which you send the water down to the river and so on. So it's just sparkling imagination about what are the things that are very visible and the things that are less visible, but are even as important or more, and how you keep adding complexity. I think it's a perfect template to become material and become and solve all these other issues of architecture that give more layers and more layers to to the building and to the space. So congratulations.
We have a little extra time for the first time this semester, and at first we have a quick time for wrap-up comments, and I have a long thank you speech to all of our jurors planned. But Daphne, I'm curious to hear from you just a little bit about where where we would have gone, or kind of how you some of these comments. I really love the idea of this kind of meticulous, kind of behind the scenes engineering, or below, the kind of deepening of the foundation, that line that everyone's just kind of underneath, nothing happens, and questions about the greenhouse and the programming. I know some of these you wrestled with, some of these you didn't. Where do you feel like this ended up, or how do you understand this feedback? I know these are kind of open-ended, lofty questions I'm asking you, but I'm curious to hear from you.
Well, I think the comment about making the corridor hallways something useful that also have a programmatic function, not only where the houses be used, but the spaces in between them, because right now they are just the hallways to get to the different places, would be a really cool place to go. And with mentioned about the shelving, also having the specific functions and broken up into different types of archival material would be also very interesting. So yeah, I like the idea of expanding the different pods within it, so it's not just flat land kind of around the different structures.
Daphne, enough kind words have been said already about your project, but I'll just say again, it's really exciting. There's so much I like about it, and it just represents a remarkable amount of development and achievement in one semester. It's been wonderful seeing not only this project develop, but all of your work. I want to be mindful of our jurors' time, but if you have closing remarks or general thoughts to the students, I would love to hear them. Insights into the program and the nature of architecture, or just how to proceed in the career, or everything. Is the floor is open to everything.
Well, I could talk about all of those things for a very long time. So I'll try and be specific about my takeaways from today, which I'm just really impressed that for some people, from what I'm understanding, the way you introduced them, Adam, this is their first time drafting or drawing, because the drawings are all, line work. And I think that the dean had mentioned, this isn't just graphic, that you're thinking architecturally. I'm really, impressed with the axons, the perspectives, the plans, and that they're very clear. And the architecture stuff, it was a great review. I mean, everyone had a concept, and it was a project there were 2 other projects this semester. So you guys have packed a lot into a semester with crazy COVID, and I'm seeing a lot of the students are wearing masks, and it looks like they're in studio. So maybe this is we're in a transition period into back to normal times. I'm sure it'll be a new normal, but it's great for me to be in New York and to be able to be in a review in New Orleans, although I did mess up the time this morning, but Adam caught me in this Zoom at 9 a.m. my time. But anyway, I think that the projects are all really great, and I'm just really impressed with the development and the sophistication. And I would say that, that these are really good foundation to kind of take whatever you want to do and go further. And I guess since we do have a little bit more time, if students have any questions about things like career path, or like one big question about architecture, I'd be more than willing to answer one of those specific questions. But yeah, this was a great day and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Adam.
Yeah, I think what I'm most excited about, it's twofold. And like you said, Brant, it's like, this is really high level work for freshmen in college, especially with the technical challenges of coming into a program, perhaps not ever drawing digitally before. I was one of those students at Penn who was thrown into the advanced DigiBlast without having ever drawn on the computer. And that curve, that learning curve that you have to ride is intense. And you guys are doing it not only technically well, but you're really interrogating some very complex architectural strategies. You're thinking about programming, thinking about form. So Adam really piled it on for you, but you did a really good job with tackling all of that. And these are skills that you're going to take with you for the rest of your career. I mean, I draw like this every day. So it's nice to see you guys really digging in and also very clearly getting excited about it. It's really, really great.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see how interesting your drawings are and how detailed y'all got with like all the little connections in the exhibits, and even like the succulents on this desk, like the incredible level of detail that are in so many of the little bunny. They're in just so many of your drawings. And I know we didn't talk about it a lot, but the first sort of like 3 objects that y'all drew, those were also like insanely detailed and amazing in all different sorts of ways. So I know that like learning Rhino can be definitely like a big curveball, but I'm excited to see that it seemed that y'all were excited about these drawings and exploring that whole path and trying to figure out how to start your first sort of like design project. So it's really nice to see that too.
Yeah, let me add that I think the role of this first year is to make you visual thinkers or spatial thinkers. No, you came from the high school with a lot of papers and stuff, and then now you are becoming people who think in the space with your pencil and with your mouse, etc. So, and I think every year, every review that I attend at this point is more sophisticated. So you are putting some fear in the previous generation, as the previous ones were doing, and that's great. And congratulations, Adam, and all the team for that. I think in this process of becoming visual thinkers, you probably are done with your projects, but I think it's worth for you to reflect with your hand on top of them and put some trace papers and analyze what you have done. Okay, these are the enclosed space. These are the walls. These are the glasses. These are in different diagrams. This is the program diagram. This is the water diagram. This is how goods move or how people move. Just to explore and to realize the power of the projects that you have done, that I'm sure you are still in the process of discovering. And I think that this is a great start to the design process, in which you are asking questions and asking more questions. And every time you are asking a new question, what about the materials? What about, every time is one more question in the design process that gives you the possibility of moving forward. And I think that what we have seen, the portion that I have seen is really, I'm really happy to see that. So thank you all. You are in great shape.
Brant, Katie, Maria, and Dean Alday, thank you so much for taking your time to sharing your time with us. I know you all have busy offices or renovations or a million things going on. Really appreciate it. I hope all of you, all the students, understand that and appreciate that as well. Do any of the students, do you have any questions for our reviewers, or any expressions of gratitude perhaps? That was a lead to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Everyone, I have a few comments just for the students, but I want to relieve our jurors. Thank you so much again. I wish I was immediately taking you all out to lunch or having a wrap up conversation, but thank you so much. Students, a few comments. I'm going to thank you again, Brant. Thank you again, Kate.
Bye.
And I'm going to stop the YouTube. I don't know how to do that on YouTube. Maybe I can't stop the YouTube. Naomi, do you know how to end the YouTube broadcast?
I'm sorry, I don't. I'll ask Victor real quick.